Hey Abby, your thing went purple. It happens, yeah.
Sometimes turning on and off the camera is enough, it seems like, but it varies.
Um, is Dave Moeller chairing today or is it Steve
Oh,
Wokel?
It is Aaron, thanks for asking. It is Steve Wolfall today.
Oh, okay. Good
Yes,
to know that.
and then Sarah Lee also emailed had non-attendance. That's all I have
Okay.
so far. Yeah, thank you.
I am just having some tech difficulties with my computer, so I had asked Annette to share her screen. So she is just gonna try that at the moment.
Roger. Good to know it.
Dave, you also have the file in case anything happens.
Inbox?
Chat with you and Annette and
Okay,
myself.
perfect. Let me download. Thank you.
I'm downloading it now. Sorry.
Fantastic. I'm gonna send a message to the waiting room and thank you all for bearing with me through this.
Thank you. All good.
Ah, sorry.
I got it on my end, Annette, so you are fine.
You're good to go?
I'm good to go. Yep.
Okay, sorry.
No, I appreciate the backup.
Yeah, no worries. And if you have problems, I'll try to take over. Okay.
Okay, thank you. I
Oh,
appreciate that.
no
Screen is
problem.
going up, and then people are gonna come in.
Aaron, is everybody in?
Yes, I think we are all set and the recording is going. So whenever you're ready.
All right, let's get started. Welcome everybody to the Boston MPO meeting of February 15th. Um, could we advance the slide? I'll do the certification stuff. And all right, notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. And in terms of guidelines, all participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. After the roll call, board members may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. To participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. Find this by clicking either on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with a raise hand button at the bottom, or the reactions button in the toolbar. And with that, I will call participants and or they appear. If you are on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. If you have any technical difficulties, please contact Abby Cutramez, I guess, via the chat box or at acutrumBes@ctps.org or 857-702-3682. All right, the accessibility statement. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1, Level AA standards, and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, please contact Abby at the MPO staff at acutrumBes@ctps.org or again at 857-702-3682. All right, with that, David, will you read the roll, please?
Absolutely. I will now call the roll. Steve Wolfall.
Steve Wolf, representing Secretary and CEO of MassDOT. Monica Tibbetts not here.
John Bouchard.
John Bouchard, representing Highway Administrator Jonathan Gulliver, present.
Pardon me. And MassDOT Highway Division.
John Romano, MassDOT Highway Division here.
MBTA.
Good morning. This is Laura Gilmore representing the MPTA.
Massport. We had advance notice from Sarah. We'll go to MAPC.
Good morning, Eric Barrasso with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Thank you. Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board.
It's okay. You can just write me into the MOU. I won't mind. Brian Kane, MBTA Advisory Board. Good morning.
Good morning. Advisory Council.
Leonard Diggins, Advisory Council here.
Thank you. City of Boston, BTD.
Morning, Jen Rowe with the City of Boston and representing Mayor Michelle Wu.
Good morning. City of Boston, BPDA.
Jim Fitzgerald with the BPDA representing Mayor Wu in the City of Boston.
Thank you. At large, City of Everett.
Eric Molinari sitting in for Jay Monty, representing Mayor DeMaria and the City of Everett.
At large, City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kozis, representing Mayor Ruth Ann Fuller in the City of Newton.
At large, Town of Arlington.
Morning, John Alessi, representing Select Board Chair Eric Helmuth in the Town of Arlington.
At large, Town of Brookline.
Good morning, Erin Chute, representing Select Board Chair Bernard Green for the Town of Brookline.
Good morning. Inner Core Committee, City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville, representing Mayor Katiana Ballantyne in the Inner Core Committee.
Good morning. Minuteman Advisory Group on Interlocal Coordination, Town of Acton. Metro West Regional Collaborative, City of Framingham.
Dennis Giabetti, representing Metro West and Mayor Sinsky.
Roger. North Shore Task Force, City of Beverly.
Darlene Wynn, representing the North Shore Task Force on behalf of Mayor Michael Cahill.
Thank you. North Suburban Planning Council, Town of Burlington.
I do not see Melissa Tinkopoulos.
Thank you. South Shore Coalition, Town of Hull.
I do not see a representative from Hull.
Roger. Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, Town of Rentham.
And I also do not see a representative from Rentham.
Got it. Thank you. Three Rivers Interlocal Council, Town of Norwood.
Good morning, Tom O'Rourke from the Town of Norwood, representing the Trick subregion.
Good morning, Tom. Federal Highway Administration.
Do not see any representatives.
Roger. Federal Transit Administration.
Also do not see any representatives from FTA.
Thank you. That is the roll, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Dave, and welcome again to everyone. I'll move on to the next item, number 2, Chair's Report. I do not have one. So with that, we'll go to agenda item 3, which is the Executive Director's Report. Take it away, Tegan.
Thanks, Steve. Welcome, everybody. Next slide, please. So just to run through a couple of the usual categories I'd like to cover with you all at the beginning of these meetings. First of all, I did want to highlight that there are some job postings, a couple of new ones and a couple that remain on our website. So if you can help us advertise and recruit for these roles, we always greatly appreciate it. We'll have we just posted the transportation planner for capital programming position, which was the one that was held before by Logan Casey. We also have a new posting for data collector. And then we continue to have postings for a manager of model development and a principal analyst that would focus on travel demand modeling. Next slide, please. So for the engagement updates today, the one thing I really want to highlight is that we had a really great first meeting yesterday with the Vision Zero Task Force. Actually, I think it was 2 days ago. Sorry, I can't follow time. And this is the group that's going to guide the development of the Boston Region Vision Zero Action Plan, which is funded through the Safe Streets and Roads for All federal discretionary grant. So this is a great group. There's 18 members, and we had almost a full turnout. And just a highlight for the board who's participating in this, we have representatives from 7 of the 8 subregions. We have quite a few levels of government represented through planners, department heads, and elected officials, counselors, that sort of thing. We also have really good membership from our state and federal partners, including MassDOT, the MBTA, and the DOT, and Volpe's representing US DOT. And then we have a lot of community and advocacy leaders like those from Mass Bike, Walk Massachusetts, and the Massachusetts Healthy Aging Collaborative. So we've been really pleased to assemble this group and all the interest that they have already shown. They've been very involved and vocal right from the start. And so we had the first meeting was really a great chance to build relationships and lay the groundwork for the collaboration that's going to ensue in developing the plan. You're welcome to check out our website here if you want to learn more about the initiative that we're engaging in. Next slide. So just to highlight, we have a pretty solid agenda again today. After approving minutes, we'll have 5 action items. The first 2 are work scopes that are MPO funded. So those will be work scopes about the exploration of blue bikes and transit connections, and for lab and municipal parking phase 2. And then we'll also have a work scope that's funded through MassDOT directed PO funds for a COUNT program for the MBTA. And then we'll continue our conversation about performance targets today. Sam Taylor will present on the transit safety performance targets, and we'll ask you to vote to approve those. And then there'll also be an action item to approve after a public comment period, TIP Amendment 4 for FFY 24 through 28. Next slide. And I just will take a quick pause to say there is a public comment period coming up right after my report. So thank you for asking that question in the chat. Then today also we'll have presentations on 2 things. One will be a study where we looked at the use of Conveil in our DIDB work and our TIP scoring process. And then we'll have a pretty bulky update on the status of the MPO target funded TIP projects that comes out of the TIP readiness days. Next slide. So our next meetings, next meeting, March 7th, I just want to highlight that we'll continue our conversations about performance targets. And also we will begin to talk about the TIP project scores for the new TIP at the next meeting. And then we'll plan to hold the following 2 meetings on March 21st and April 4th as in-person meetings with a hybrid or remote participation option. And the reason for that is we expect those meetings to be focused on talking about scenarios for the federal fiscal year 25 to 29 TIP. And I think that is it.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Anyone have any questions for Tegan? Leonard, do you have a question?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you. So the Blue Bike study is an MPO funded study? Because I had the impression that it was MBTA.
Oh, good question. Let me just quickly confirm. I thought it was an MPO discrete study funded projects.
Tegan, why don't we, and Leonard, we're going to have that in a couple of agenda items. So why don't we look that up and confirm that we pick it up, and let me move to public comment, unless anyone else have any questions for Tegan right now.
I'll just say that Len is correct. I was incorrect. So we will talk about it during the scope. Thank you.
Thank you. No problem.
All right. With that, I see Rob has his hand, but I assume that's for public comment. So let's move to agenda item 4, public comments. Anyone have any issues to raise the MPO? So Rob, you raise your hand. Go ahead. And then I'll...
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and thank you for all you do. I know it's super hard. My name's Rob Dole. I'm the town administrator of Linfield, and I'm here to advocate for our rail trail project. It's the Wakefield-Linfield Rail Trail project, which has really been worked on for almost 15 to 20 years. We're still on the tip for 2026. We did have a setback as the federal government did change our floodplains. This rail trail goes over a federally protected reedy meadow. It is not only going to be a rail trail for walkers and hikers, but an environmental site for people to really learn about the beauty of our region. We now have plans in place to be fully ready for 2026. We have Stantec that is working with us. We have incredible community support. We have dedicated $300,000 in ARPA money to get this done for 26. My municipal friends, this isn't about Linfield and Wakefield. It's the entryway. It's now one of the top priorities of the trail program. It will open the door to rail trails all the way up the North Shore. So it's an important project. If you see it, I ask for your consideration. We are ready to go in 26. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you, Rob. I have someone from Belmont, and then Brad, I see you from Somerville.
Morning.
Okay,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry.
I'm sorry, Patrice, you first. Go
Good
ahead.
morning, Patrice Garvin, Town Administrator here in Belmont. Wanted to thank the MPO for an opportunity to speak today. In regards to a community path that the town of Belmont has been engaged for constructing for quite a few years. I know we're going on multiple decades of the goal of this community to install a path. The path is crucial to unlocking certain segments of the town in terms of economic development, safety to schools, walkability. The support in the community is vast. I can tell you that the funding for design work has been at multiple town meetings and has been approved by very large margins. The current select board and previous select boards that I've worked with all have been in favor and very supportive of the path. So we're very excited to get through the next couple of years and see construction begin on this path. So thank you very much.
All right. Anything else from the Belmont Town Engineer? Are you good or?
Yeah, just real quick, thank you. I'm Glenn Clancy, Town Engineer for Town of Belmont. Just wanted to give you a quick update. First, thank you very much for programming us in 26, the Belmont Community Path. Just wanted to let you know where we are in our timeline with the 25% design public hearing is scheduled for March 7th. We expect, once we clear that hurdle, to have our 75% design submitted by June 30th of this year. That will then clear the way for me to begin right-of-way. I expect the right-of-way to be about a 12-month process. So I'm expecting to wrap up right-of-way end of June in 25, and then that leaves the fall and the early winter to wrap up the design efforts to get to 100% PS&E and give MassDOT their opportunity to put it out to bid. Hopefully, I think we're expecting shovel in the ground in probably late third quarter, early fourth quarter of 26. So we are right on pace to meet the programming year that you guys have placed us in. And again, just want to thank you for the opportunity and thank you for the support.
All right. Thank you. Brad, you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate the opportunity to provide some quick public comment this morning. There are two things I would like to flag. First is to just reinforce the element from the Executive Director's report, Chair. The Vision Zero task force that this MPO is administering is a real step change in how we communicate and coordinate and plan across this great region. I was really, really pleased with the attendance, with the diversity across subregions and across subject matter disciplines in the team that has been assembled. I will be representing Somerville and the inner core and continuing to work with state agency partners, advocacy community, and all of our municipalities around the region. So please stay tuned. Please take this seriously. This is a real once-in-a-generation opportunity for all of us to move the needle and reduce the risk that our residents are run over on our streets. This is unacceptable, and we can do better. The second thing I would like to flag today, Chair, is a quick report on the McGrath Boulevard project for this board. I'm delighted to report that MassDOT, who is managing this project development because it's a project of regional significance, held a really great public information meeting a couple of nights ago. About 300 people signed up for it, Chair. About 150 showed up. Somerville staff were panelists in partnership demonstrating solidarity and support with our partners at MassDOT. The project team was prepared, they were professional, they were patient with all of the questions that come for such an important project that frankly we've all committed to as an MPO for the last decade or more. So the project is on track. You will notice in our attachments for today's meeting that MassDOT has recommended preserving the FY27 funding to begin construction for McGrath Boulevard. So really, really pleased with the progress and look forward to continuing to collaborate with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. And then Mr. Fry from Hingham.
Good morning, everyone. Excuse me. First of all, I'd just like to echo Mr. Rawson's comments on the Vision Zero effort. I'm excited to be a part of it, and I'm excited to work with the team to drive this safety initiative. The second item that I wanted to briefly bring to the MPO's attention, the Hingham Route 3A Improvement Project has submitted the 75% design and remains on track for advertisement within the 2025 TIP. We are looking at a calendar year, spring 2026 start of construction. And so I'll be curious to see what the intention of the MPO will be in terms of allocating funding for the project in particular tip years. But I look forward to having that discussion and appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
All right. Anyone else have public comments for the MPO today? All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's move on to agenda item 5, to the committee chair's report. Are there any committee chairs that have any reports for the MPO today?
Mr. Chair, Tom Bent, I have a committee report for the MOU committee.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
All right. Thanks, Mr. Chair, and good morning to all. Our last committee meeting was on February 7th, and we discussed the topic of RTA representation on the board. We began this talk by reviewing a summary of the proposal by the Metro West Regional Transit Authority and the Cape Ann Transportation Authority. We will use the next committee meeting to prepare a recommendation to the full board on the representation topic for consideration. On February 7th, we also reviewed the staff-led MOU document updates as a separate item. Our next meeting was scheduled to be on February 21st, but we realized that kind of runs into school vacation week. So some members had asked us if we could move that. So what we're doing is we're going to cancel that meeting. And our next meeting is on March 6th, which was previously scheduled. So we will cancel the February 21st meeting, and we'll just continue with the March 6th meeting. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to share them. Thank you.
Anyone have any questions for Tom? All right, seeing none. Jen, you have an update?
I do, thank you. I would like to invite everyone here to the next TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee meeting, which will be this afternoon at 1 p.m. Ethan's going to share a brief overview of trends in project scoring, and then we're going to spend the bulk of the time digging deeper into the readiness changes that Ethan will be presenting on later in this meeting. Also, please pencil in the afternoons of March 14th and 28th for upcoming committee meetings. We'll be confirming those at the meeting today. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for Jen? All right. Any other chairs have any reports? All right. Seeing none, we'll move to agenda item 6, the Regional Transportation Advisory Council report. Leonard, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so we had our meeting yesterday, and we continued discussion about work repricing. This time with Seth Asante, and Seth, as you expect, is doing a great job of continuing work that Ryan Hicks led. And it's very clear that the members the Advisory Council are very interested in continuing in the discussion about this topic and engaging in it more intensely. And it also became clear that they would like to see pilots instead of more studies. So I just represent my board and maybe my council, and I'm relaying that. And we also talked with Ethan about the next step that's under development, and I'm not going to steal his thunder by saying anything more about it. That's it, Mr. Chair. Thank you. And our next meeting will be on the 13th, the second Wednesday of March.
All right. Any questions for Leonard? Seeing none, let's move to agenda item 7, which is our first action item that Tegan pointed out. It's the December 21st, 2023 minutes. Can I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes, and I'll open up for any changes or comments? Eric.
Eric Barassa, I make a motion to approve the December 21st meeting minutes.
John.
I will second that motion.
All right. Any comments or questions, changes on the minutes? All right. Seeing none. Dave, do you want to read the roll, please?
I will call the roll. Steve Wolfel.
Yes.
John Bouchard.
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano.
John Romano, yes.
Laura Gilmore.
Laura Gilmore, yes.
Eric Barassa.
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane.
Kane, yes.
Len Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari.
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi again.
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute.
Karen Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Have I missed anyone? The motion passes. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you everyone for that. We'll now move on to our next agenda item 8, which is the work scope for exploration of Blue Bikes transit connections. This is our second action item, and I'll turn it over to Tanner.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. My name is Tanner Bonner, and I'm a data analyst on the MPO staff. I'm here today to present a work scope for the exploration of Blue Bikes transit connections. This project is funded under MassDOT directed PL funds. The cost of this project is approximately $65,000 and is expected to take 7 months to complete after work commences. Bike share programs have been widely recognized as one solution to decrease travel times, encourage mode shift, increase system connectivity, and provide first and last mile connections. Despite readily available ridership and survey data, there has not yet been a thorough investigation of how Blue Bikes currently and could provide connections to public transit. The primary objective of this project is to leverage available trip and survey data to identify existing Blue Bikes trip flows of users making first and last mile connections to transit. Additionally, staff will identify potential future Blue Bikes locations that may best serve first and last mile connections with an emphasis on increasing access for environmental justice communities. This project builds off of recent work we've done that has looked at multimodal interconnectivity, such as the MBTA Mobility Integration Study. This project has 4 work tasks. In task 1, we'll conduct a literature review to explore previous efforts that have utilized bike share planning to serve first and last mile connections. And we'll also investigate any published methodologies and analyses that leverage similar data to explore trip patterns between bike share and transit. In task 2, we'll synthesize available trip and survey data from Blue Bikes in the MBTA to identify the prevalence of bike trip patterns by users making first and last mile transit connections and investigate the characteristics of such trips. In task 3, we'll leverage insights from trip and survey data analysis to explore the potential of future Blue Bike system expansions to serve first and last mile connections by conducting accessibility analyses using Conveyo. Conveyo is a software that allows us to estimate access to destinations by mode and travel time throughout the region. In task 4, we'll explore ways to meaningfully communicate analysis findings to relevant stakeholders, and we'll also document methodologies and findings throughout the duration of the project. The final product for this project will be a memorandum that describes the findings from the literature review, the analysis processes, and the results of the analyses. I am happy to answer any questions, but otherwise at this time, I'd like to ask that the board please vote to approve this scope. Thank you.
Hold on, I muted myself. All right, can I get a motion second to approve this scope, and then I'll open up to any questions anyone has for Tanner. Leonard.
I am delighted to make a motion to approve this work scope.
Laura.
I will second that.
All right, anyone have any questions?
I do, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Leonard.
Yeah, and the reason I asked about whether asked about whether this was MBTA or MPO studies because I am so interested in this. But I read at the end that it was going to be an internal memo, and so I am hoping that we can get a summary of it, or maybe a modified version of it, and it doesn't even have to be presented, at a meeting. It's just if it gets mailed out to us, that would be great, because I think it's going to be really interesting to see what comes out of Conveyo, and just anecdotal, well, not anecdotal, but just a little story. And I was reading the needs assessment, and I saw actually the MPO had noted that one of the heaviest ODX, or one of the biggest ODX pairs, was between Davis Square and this intersection, Cameron and Mass Ave in North Cambridge, and the distance there is like a quarter mile, probably maximum, and so I would never have thought that you would have that kind of pairing. So I'm really interested in seeing what's going to come out of what other pairings that we get. So I am really wholeheartedly supportive of the study. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Leonard. John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a similar comment to Len, where I would just recommend that if MPO staff find any data that might be helpful for municipalities that make up the Blue Bike system, to share that. I know that when I started my role with Arlington, I did a full analysis of every trip that started and or ended in Arlington to figure out what the travel patterns were. And one of the key findings I found was that 31% of those trips involve a red line station, indicating that Arlington residents and visitors are using Blue Bikes as probably the first and last mile public transit connection. So, and that has helped me tremendously with making the argument that Blue Bikes needs to remain here in Arlington. So if MPO staff find any findings like that could be helpful for municipalities, I recommend that they share that directly with staff so that we can kind of bolster this as a public transportation system. Thank you.
Thank you. Seth and then Jen.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to ask a question. Looking forward to this, excited about this. Will this report get into for the recommendations for further locations? You may have said this, but I was trying to take notes as you were talking about the tasks. Will the process assess barriers in future ideal locations given disconnections in the current system, or will it make recommendations based on the current system? I guess what assumptions are going to be made about the current infrastructure and project or progress on expansion of the current bike infrastructure?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we actually will be looking at the transportation network, specifically the bicycle level of traffic stress, to see where there are both the existence and absence of such routes. So we wouldn't be making recommendations based solely on the existing network, but where there could be future improvements as well, with an emphasis on equity and access for environmental justice communities.
All right, you good, Seth?
Yes, thank you.
All right, Jen and then David.
I'll echo the excitement for this study. We, at the City of Boston, would love to see more stations, Blue Bike stations at MBTA stations. I will, one of my requests has already been voiced, so thank you, Len, for that. Another I guess request is that I noticed that using Conveil, and there was a note about data pertaining to the level of traffic stress, and I saw Conveil has kind of a built-in ability to kind of assign LTS, and I guess I would love to request or have another further conversation around, for at least for the City of Boston, we have our own like level of traffic stress that we believe is more robust and accurate, likely than what would be otherwise generated. So if you could please use that, we would appreciate it. And then I think I would be remiss in not taking this opportunity to request, while not exactly in the context purview of the study, that the City of Boston has had a challenge in the past in citing Blue Bike stations at T property because there's an application charge and also a monthly fee, at least last time I was checked. So if that policy might be reconsidered, we would appreciate that. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Jen. David.
Thank you. I certainly agree that that Blue Bikes could be a great connection to transit in some areas, especially with the bus network redesign. You know, the first thing I thought was, gosh, wouldn't it be nice to have some sort of opportunity in some time to coordinate, you know, at least to look at any chance to coordinate Charlie cards with Blue Bikes, some sort of transfer opportunity, you know, maybe not with this study, but, you know, with fair transformation going on. I don't know if anyone's ever looking at that or thinking about that, but it could be a great connection and encouragement. Thanks.
All right. Anyone? Oh, Laura, go ahead, Laura.
I'll just take the opportunity to follow up on a couple of the questions that were asked today and say, you know, thank you all for your comments on the scope of work, and for your excitement about this topic. You know, we at the T also think this is an important work scope and an important area of research for us to gather some more data on how we can connect between blue bikes and transit service. So hearing your comments about wanting to hear what comes out of the study, we can certainly accommodate that and work with MPO staff on the right forum to bring that back in. David, I hear your comment about connectivity between the fare systems, and I'll just repeat again that that was one of the reasons why the MPO staff here referenced our mobility integration study, which I believe we had previously, that scope had come to this board as well. That study was looking at, what are the precedents in other parts of the world for how connections between different types of services can be made. So.
All right, Schuster.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on a remark that John Alessi had made. If any of the outcomes from this study or work scope can inform currently in design projects or projects that have recently been completed in municipalities that were TIP programmed, I think that it would be very valuable. We know that there's a path forward, and Mass.OTP recently shared some guidance with MPO staff on ways to consider small incremental investments to previously completed TIP program projects that would support those last mile connections. For example, we've had questions from communities for years on that, and outcomes from a study like this would definitely inform making projects and design better, hopefully. So I just hope that that's an outcome and that staff are talking with each other, both at the MPO and, of course, MPO with municipalities. That was all. Thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, with that, Dave, you want to read the roll, please?
Absolutely. Steve Wolfel?
Yes.
Oh, actually, has there been a motion and a second?
Yep. Leonard did the motion and Laura seconded it.
Perfect. Okay. John Bouchard?
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano?
John Romano, yes.
Laura Gilmore?
Yes.
Eric Barassa?
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane?
Kane, yes.
Len Diggins?
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe?
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald?
Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari?
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis?
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi?
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute?
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent?
Tom Bent, yes.
Dennis Giambetti?
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen? Just to repeat, Darlene Nguyen?
Yep, sorry, I was in the chat. Darlene Nguyen, yes.
No worries. Thank you. Tom O'Rourke?
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
The motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tanner. It looks like you have your work out for you. A lot of interest, so you better get started. All right, let's move on to agenda item 9. It's also an action item. It's work scope for lab and municipal parking phase 2, and this is Sophie Fox. So Sophie, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning. My name is Sophie Fox, and I'm a data analyst with the Boston Region MPO. Today, I will be presenting the work scope for the 2024 UPWP discrete study titled Lab and Municipal Parking Phase 2. The study has a budget of $45,000 and will last for about 7 months after work commences. Some of you may remember or have been involved in Phase 1 of the study, which was completed in the federal fiscal year 2023. In Phase 1, CDPS and MAPC collaborated to assess regional parking supply and utilization at commercial and mixed-use developments with a particular focus on lab and life science facilities. Through market research and stakeholder interviews, we gained a better understanding of the life sciences industry in the Boston region and the part that parking plays in the development and use of these facilities. This phase of the study will have 2 objectives. So first, using the information that we gathered and the materials we drafted in Phase 1, we will set out to measure the actual parking supply and utilization at lab and life science facilities and explore what factors influence parking patterns. We will then synthesize the results of the data collection and analysis into a series of recommendations that can help developers, municipal planners, and policymakers determine appropriate parking supply. Our data collection will consist of 2 tactics. We will be distributing an online survey to property managers at life science labs throughout the Boston region, and we will be conducting on-site data collection at a subset of these labs, recording parking counts. The first step of this will be to pilot our data collection methodology, sending the survey out to a handful of property managers and sending data collectors out to a few sites. This is to determine if our methodology needs to be refined in any way before implementing it on a larger scale. The information that we are seeking through our data collection includes information about the properties themselves and their tenants, the parking supply and utilization patterns at these locations, any transportation demand management strategies in place, and more. With this data, we plan to perform analyses based off the ones from MAPC's Perfect Fit Parking Study. We will produce descriptive summary statistics of our data, and we will work to create a model that will help determine which variables most closely correlate with parking utilization. Our results will be summarized in a technical memo that will also provide recommendations to those tasked with determining proper parking provision at these types of properties across the Boston region. We will be presenting these results at an MPO board meeting, as well as making them publicly available. We request your approval of this work program and are happy to take questions. And I'd also like to ask if anyone on this call has contacts with property managers or developers that you think would like to participate in the data collection. Please either chat me your email or you can reach out to me directly. I will be putting my email in the chat. Thank you. And yeah, any questions?
All right. First, before I take questions, someone want to make a motion, a second, to approve the work scope? Tom?
I will make a motion to put forward the work scope for lab and municipal parking phase 2.
Brian?
Second.
All right. Anyone have any questions for Sophie? Brian, you have a question? Nope, that's just left hand. Okay. And left up from before. Okay. Any questions? All right. Seeing none. Dave, you want to read the roll, please?
Yes, absolutely. Steve Wolfel,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston taking over for Laura Gilmore from the MBTA, yes.
Thank you. Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes. I'm very excited about this body work.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Len Diggins,
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen.
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Thank you. Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sophie. Good job. Now we'll move on to agenda item 10, which is another action item. It's the work scope for federal fiscal year 2024 MBTA account program. And Rose, please take it away.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rose McCarran. I'm the manager of our project analysis and applications team at the MPO. Today, I'm presenting a work scope for the MBTA account program support for federal fiscal year 2024. This project is supported by MassDOT directed planning funds and has a budget of $40,000. In the project, CTPS will support the MBTA by collecting manual ridership counts in selected locations where there's non-existent or insufficient automated data on ridership. We're going to focus the count efforts on the Fairmount line of the commuter rail and on selected Green Line stations. The project will primarily engage the data collection staff that we have at CTPS, and we will deliver passenger counts on a rolling basis as they are collected and processed. CTPS will not be performing any technical analysis as part of the scope of work. We will just be performing the counts, processing them, and providing them to the MBTA. And with that, we're requesting the board's approval of the scope, and I'll pass it back to the chair.
All right, can I get a motion second to approve this? And I'll open up to questions. Jen and then Eric. Jen?
I will motion to approve this.
Eric?
I'll second that motion.
All right, any questions for Rose? Eric, is that a question or? Nope. All right, I don't see any questions. Dave, you want to read the roll, please?
Absolutely. Steve Wolfel,
Yes.
John Bouchard,
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano,
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston,
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Eric Barassa,
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane,
Kane, yes.
Len Diggins,
Dickens, yes.
Jen Rowe,
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald,
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari,
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis,
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi,
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute,
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent,
Tom Bent, yes.
Dennis Giambetti,
Dennis Chimbetta, yes.
Darlene Nguyen,
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Rose. Thank you, everybody. We'll now move on to agenda item 11, which is also an action item. It's transit safety performance targets, and Sam will take us through this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Taylor, and I am the manager of performance-based planning and programming. And today I will be presenting to you the 2024 transit safety performance targets. Next slide, please. So a quick overview of what we will cover today. I will provide a refresher on performance-based planning and programming activities. We will touch briefly on the process by which transit safety targets are adopted. I will quickly describe the transit safety performance measures before you, and that will be for all three RTAs, MBTA, the Cape Ann Transportation Authority, and the Metro West Regional Transit Authority. We will then discuss some next steps, including how the transit safety targets feed into MPO programming, and then we will ask the board to take a vote on the presented 2024 transit safety targets. Next slide, please. In terms of performance measures housed in performance-based planning and programming, the transit safety targets before you are the second of three performance target areas that will need to be adopted by the board this winter. And then later this year, likely in July, 4-year greenhouse gas emissions targets will be put forward for adoption. And those are being worked on currently. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the target setting process that the applicable agencies follow. The process begins with the U.S. Department of Transportation. U.S. DOT establishes requirements on transit safety performance targets, which is guided by the National Public Transportation Safety Plan. Transit agencies then write their own safety plans, which include performance and targets, which are updated annually. And then MPOs then work with transit agencies to set regional targets. Next slide, please. So there are 7 measures in 4 categories on which the MPO is required to adopt targets and report on performance. And they are in the 4 categories of fatalities, injuries, safety events, and system reliability. Fatalities include deaths due to collision, derailment, fire, hazardous material spills, acts of God, system or personal security events, or other safety events. And please note that fatalities include both passengers and employees. Injuries include instances of damage or harm to persons that require immediate medical attention away from the scene because of a reportable transit safety event. And please note that injuries also include both passengers and employees. Safety events are incidents on transit vehicles or their rights of way, such as crashes, derailments, or events at transit stations. And system reliability is a measure of how far each mode of transit system can go without a breakdown. The official measure is vehicle revenue miles per major mechanical failure, and that metric is an average. For fatalities, injuries, and safety events, the desired direction of performance are lower totals, and for system reliability, the desired direction of performance are greater totals, meaning more miles traveled between mechanical failures. Next slide, please. So to summarize the previous slides before we get into the performance targets themselves, the FTA requires that transit agencies create safety plans that include safety management systems, or SMS. These plans, which include safety targets, are turned over to MPOs, who then use those plans to set performance targets for federal transit safety measures. And while MPOs and transit agencies are required to set targets annually, the FTA does not impose penalties for failure to meet targets. However, transit agencies are required to comply with the Public Transportation Agency Safety Plans regulations through its triennial reviews of their safety plans by the FTA. After the targets are adopted, the MPO then considers transit safety performance as part of capital programming for the TIP. Next slide, please. In the next 4 slides, we will cover the MBTA's recent safety performance and 2024 performance targets. Next slide, please. This first slide shows safety targets for bus service, which includes motor buses, commuter buses, and trolley buses. The row for performance, which is the top row, shows annual averages for the years of 2020 to 2022. When you compare that to the row for 2023 targets, MBTA reached all targets except for fatalities, fatality rate, and system reliability on its buses. And then next, please. And then the proposed targets for bus service are all more ambitious in 2024, with the exception of the measure of system reliability. Next slide, please. This next slide shows safety targets and performance for heavy rail service, which includes blue, orange, and red line service. Safety performance as compared to the 2023 targets was mixed for heavy rail. The targets were reached for raw totals of injuries and safety events, as well as system reliability. However, the performance in 2020 to 2022 was just short in fatalities, fatality rate, injury rate, and safety event rate. And then next, please. So MBTA has put forth stronger targets in 2024 for injuries, safety events, and system reliability, and this partially accounts for projections in vehicle revenue miles. Next slide, please. Light rail performance and targets are for the Green Line and Mattapan Line. Light rail performance from 2020 to 2022 met all 2023 targets, except for raw totals for injuries. Next, please. And for 2024, MBTA has held a few targets the same and put forth more ambitious targets for injury rate, safety event rate, and system reliability. Next slide, please. And our last MBTA target slide, paratransit services, which is better known as the RIDE, are shown here. When measured against 2023 targets, performance from 2020 to 2022 was mixed. Paratransit services met targets on fatalities and injuries, but fell short in injury rate, safety events, and safety event rate. Performance data for system reliability was not available at the time of presentation. Next, please. And for 2024, MBTA has held steady its zero fatality target and made more ambitious targets for injuries while slightly relaxing its injury rate, safety event rate, and system reliability targets. Next slide, please. The next 2 slides will show CADA and MWRTA's targets and recent performance for 2024. Here we have the Cape Ann Transportation Authority's targets and recent performance. CADA groups its transit modes into 2 categories: fixed route, or bus and trolley route service, and demand response, which is a service that riders can request on demand to reach other parts of its service area. Please note that the metrics shown here are in 5-year averages, unlike the previous slides on the MBTA slides, which were in 3-year averages. So the performance rows indicate performance for 2019 to 2023, and the targets will account for the years 2020 to 2024. So CADA met all targets in 2023, except for system reliability for both modes, and their targets for 2024 have been adjusted as such. All targets but the system reliability target for the fixed route service remain the same as those adopted in 2023. Next slide, please. Here we have the Metro West Regional Transit Authority's targets and recent performance. Like CADA, MWRTA also groups its transit modes into two categories, fixed route and demand response. Again, these metrics shown here are 5-year averages. The performance rows indicate performance for 2019 to 2023, and the targets will account for the years 2020 to 2024. MWRTA met all targets for 2023. And the targets, the 2024 targets for fatalities, which is 0, injuries and injury rate for fixed route service, and system reliability are identical to 2023. And then all of the other targets for 2024 have been strengthened to be more ambitious than those of 2023. Next slide, please. Now that we have more information on transit safety and the proposed targets, what are the overall processes that support transit safety improvements? One strategy is through MassDOT's Capital Improvement Program, which allocates federal and state money to programs that support RTA asset improvement. The CIP considers asset condition and safety risks when scoring candidate projects for the CIP. And the MPO considers RTA investments when their projects are presented for inclusion in the TIP through its various investment programs. For example, safety considerations factored into the Jackson Square Station Accessibility Improvements Project, which received funding as part of the 2024 to 2028 TIP Transit Modernization Program. Next slide, please. Given today's presentation of the targets, MPO staff requests that the Boston Region MPO move to support the staff recommended set of 2024 transit safety targets. The deadline for adopting these targets is March 31st. And after adoption of the targets, the MPO incorporates the updated targets and information on how planned investments affect transit safety performance measures into the 2025 to 2029 TIP. Thank you all for your attention today. I will turn it back to the chair for discussion.
Thanks, Sam. All right, does anyone want to make a motion a second with the staff recommendation to adopt the staff recommended targets here as presented here? Brian?
Move to accept the staff targets.
Eric?
I'll second that motion.
Anyone have any questions? All right, Steve and then Jen.
Yes, could you clarify what you mean by a safety event? Like a derailment where no one is injured, does that count as a safety event? And does every injury that ups the safety events also? How does that work?
Yes, thank you, Steve. So safety events can include events in which fatalities or injuries took place, but these mark the events themselves. So the definition as stated from, I think, slide 5, is that safety events are events on transit vehicles or their rights of way, such as crashes, derailments, or events at transit stations.
So safety event is all inclusive, includes all the injuries and anything that shouldn't have happened that did happen, that even if there are no injuries. Correct? Thank you.
All right, Jen and then Leonard.
I got a question for the T and then a question for CADA and MWRTA. So I'll start with the T. So in the memo, it said that the T's approach to setting the injury rates, safety events, and safety event rates was to have a 2% reduction. That didn't seem to line up with the numbers in the memo. And then when you were presenting, Sam, it sounded like there was actually variations on that. So I was curious if the T could speak a little bit to how they set those targets.
Sandy?
Yeah, thanks, Jen. We have Mike Katzos and Emily Groth here from our safety department. So I'm going to refer technical questions to them if somebody could unmute one or both of them so that they could speak to that.
Hey, good morning, Sandy. Good morning, all. My name is Mike Katzos, Director of Safety Management Systems, Safety Oversight with the MBTA Safety Division. So there are a few different factors that go into the way those targets are set, Jen. We do follow the methodology established in the National Public Transportation Safety Plan, which requires us to look at the 3-year rolling average of our past performance. So that can conceal, I guess, some of the underlying factors that shape the targets for the next coming year. If we had a period of particularly strong or particularly poor performance within that window, it can sway where we settle in terms of a target for the upcoming year, but not be captured directly, directly visible or evident in some of the most recent performance data. So it takes a little bit of going through and parsing through that data on a month-to-month basis to really see how those take shape. But that does, I think, explain some of the variability you might be asking about.
Jen, does that help with the T?
Yeah, I think it definitely helps. I guess my quest is whether whether now or in the future, depending on if the board wishes to vote forward with this or not, if we could see, I think the roadway safety targets we heard about at, I think it was last month's meeting, we were able to see the kind of line graphs of the information over time that kind of led to the targets that were set. And I think that would be very helpful to kind of illustrate exactly what you're speaking to, Mike.
Yeah, we'll work with Sam and see what we may be able to do with that.
Now, Jen, you also talked about CADA and Metro West. Are there representatives from either of those RTAs right now? I guess Jim is here. So Jim, you want to answer Jen's question?
Yeah, I haven't posed that question yet, but
sorry,
my question specifically for MWRTAs, I was curious, it looked like, and maybe you could go back in the slides to the targets, that the targets being suggested were actually suggesting performance lesser than what was the actual performance averages in 2019 to 2023. So I was curious why we aren't seeing more aggressive targets being set.
So we actually are setting more aggressive targets. I'm not sure if this actually shows, this is showing some actual performance, and I'm not sure if we have a graphic here of previous year's targets, but working with our PTASP committee, obviously our safety team, we are setting routinely more aggressive targets for safety. What has been noted to the MWRTA is that our targets were initially very high a number of years ago. And what we've been doing is systematically making those more aggressive targets over time. One of the issues that the MWRTA and CADA would run into is because the number of miles driven, the number of annual passengers is quite a low number. All it takes is a single event to completely kind of yo-yo a statistic. Whereas, if you're a larger system, a single event wouldn't have the same effect, though they see the same thing with injuries as well on a larger scale. So our rates, we are improving those targets, but I'd be happy to have my team come in and do a more detailed presentation with kind of year over year rates, injuries, targets, and how those have changed over time. I'm happy to do that in the future.
All right. And is anyone from CADA here? I don't think so, Jen. So maybe, Sam, could you talk to Jen and get her concerns or questions for CADA and kind of follow up afterwards? Does that work, Jen?
Works for me. Thank you.
All right. Leonard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I have several questions, and I guess this is for you, Sam, and maybe others. Do you have a sense of why there's such variability amongst the modes for the metrics? All but fatalities, thankfully fatalities are consistently very low across all modes, but for safety, injury, and reliability, just like all over the place. Do you have a sense of why there's this variation? mean, some of it is potentially obvious, but sometimes I just don't want to assume that the obvious is true.
I
Sure,
can
Len.
speak to that a little bit.
Mike, go ahead.
Yeah. Particularly with reliability, from our experience, highly dependent on the age and makeup of our vehicle fleets.
Okay.
Less so dependent on our maintenance-related activities.
Okay.
We'll see that skew very significantly in one direction or the other when we, let's say, purchase, 100 new buses and roll them into one of our fleets, or the same goes for the heavy rail and light rail vehicles. I think for injuries can be a little more complex to identify and manage some of the underlying factors, but we look at overall ridership, we look at the makeup of that ridership, some of the environmental factors that are going on in these areas where the injuries are happening. So a lot of different factors that can shape some of the other measures.
Right. And I guess really what I'm trying to get at is what are those factors, because they'll determine like what we can do, and then what the expectations are. But we can follow up on that later on. I just wanted to see, get a sense of what we're thinking about the causes of variation, and with respect to and also, maybe we could bring in Jim, from MWRTA, and of course, Jim, I will take you up on the offer for more data over a number of years. But between the fixed route, and on-demand route, there seems to be routes. There seems to be a lot of variation, especially reliability. What's the cause of that? I guess he might be waiting for you, Mr. Chair, because I guess I should go through you, Mr. Chair, to
No, that's fine. No, you're fine. You're good. That question was for Jim, right? So Jim, go ahead. You can answer.
Sure. So for system reliability, what you're seeing the variation there is the actual performance versus our FY24 target. Again, most of our targets, maybe all of our targets, have been improved over previous year's targets. But when you look at the actual performance of those previous years, that's different than the targets from the previous years. So what you're actually seeing is very high reliability in the previous years. So what we're doing is we're improving our targets year over year, but we're also exceeding them by a wide margin. Now, the reason why we don't just jump up every single target immediately to actual performance is because, again, all it takes is a single event or some small number of events to disproportionately sway actual performances over time. So working with our safety committee, we are taking an incremental approach. It is deliberate and it is over time, but we wouldn't want to have a yo-yo effect where we increase the target so high and then one thing happens and it completely makes it look like we're not meeting performance targets.
Okay, but this is a different question. So this is the difference between, so I was looking at the memo, and this is the difference between on-demand and fixed route. It just seems that the reliability, is different from those two. This is like for the actual data as opposed to targets.
Oh, sure. So the difference between fixed route and demand response. Now, most of our fleet is actually pretty similar. Both our fixed route fleet and our demand response fleet are primarily cut van vehicles. They're both maintained by the same staff. So because of their similarities, their targets are very similar, as you can see here. Now, the difference in performance comes down to the exact type of engine, the age of the fleet. Like the representative from MBTA says, when you have brand new vehicles introduced, your miles between breakdowns, that sort of reliability standard, that can completely change. So what you're looking at here is sort of differences in vehicle types and age of fleet based on state of good repair, based on what the anticipated age of those types of vehicles are, how many miles are they supposed to run for. So they're similar and they're maintained similarly, but there's differences. And
okay.
Yeah.
Just trying to understand the differences so to get a sense of what we can expect in terms of targets, or how we craft targets and how we can expect that we'll meet the targets. So can we back up to the I guess it's the MBTA. I want to get the ride reliability data, and I might be like a couple of slides forward, backwards, you know. So yeah, that one there. I mean, so we don't have data me for 2022. You know, we had a target. I guess we have data for 2023. That's a target. That's 62,500. You know, so how are we coming up with that target? Or did you have a sense of what the data would be for 20 to 22? And so that was because then you said it was a little change, I mean, downwards. I mean, you relaxed it a little bit, but I mean, you relaxed it 25K or 26K. That's huge, you know.
Sure. I think so. There is performance data that we have used to develop our target. We are in the process of refining what that pipeline of data looks like, particularly in the case of paratransit. There are a few issues unique to paratransit in the collection of this data. It's a contract operated service with MBTA oversight staff. And we have multiple vendors that are providing the services, performing operations and maintenance for the vehicles themselves. So working to refine that work stream over time has had some impact on the way that we've established these targets. I think in the variation between the 2023 and 2024 targets, you can get a sense of how our work there has changed our expected outcomes for paratransit. We are working to broaden the scope of the failure data in particular that we collect and incorporate into our tracking. And as we've done that work over time, it's become evident that there are additional failures that need to be accounted for, which has led to a reduction in the target for 2024.
Okay, great.
Over time, as we let that run and we get a larger data set, I think we'll see that stabilize, and we should settle into some pattern where we're not seeing such dramatic variation in the target.
Okay, great. And I really appreciate this. And last thing, Mr. Chair. This is a little bit of frustration on my part. So in the appendix, it says that it's supposed to explain how we're going to reach the targets. I read through it. I saw a definition of targets, a description of the targets, but there was no real explanation of how we're going to try to reach the targets. I don't know, if that's coming out of, I don't know why the information isn't there, who's responsible for not telling us more about how we're going to try to reach these targets, but I was really hoping for not only, some sense of it, but like a real explanation for how we're going to try to reach the targets. That's it. Thank you very much.
Sam, do you want to comment on that or?
Sure. So the short answer, Len, is that's me, and that this is as we go through the TIP development cycle here, between now and when the TIP is released, there is a performance chapter in the TIP, and that is ultimately where we document how we believe we can go at these targets through our programming.
Yeah. Well, great. And that's part of the reason I was asking for why there's this variability, because without a really good handle on the cause of the problem, then we can't really even, begin, I think, to reliably use that word, try to meet the targets. So that's it. Thank you very much.
All right. Anyone else have any questions for Sam? All right. Seeing none, Dave, you want to read the roll, please?
Yes. Steve Wolfel?
Yes.
John Bouchard?
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano?
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston?
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Eric Barassa?
Eric Barassa, yes.
Brian Kane?
Kane, yes.
Len Diggins?
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe?
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald?
Jim Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari?
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis?
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi?
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute?
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent?
Tom Bent, yes.
Dennis Giambetti?
Dennis Giambetti, yes.
Darlene Nguyen?
Darlene Nguyen, yes.
Tom O'Rourke?
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
With that, the motion carries. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Jim and Mike from the team. All right. We will now move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 12. It's federal fiscal year 2024 to 2028 TIP Amendment 4. Ethan, take it away, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. My name is Ethan LaPointe. I am the Transportation Improvement Program Manager with the Boston Region MPO. The purpose of my first presentation here today is to present and discuss and at the end endorse, if we go on to the next slide, the Fourth Amendment to the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP after it has completed its 21-day public comment period. So for
Mr. Chair, could I pause this 1 second?
Sure.
I know that the sound is a little bit off to me. I don't know if it is for everybody else, but Ethan, I think you're sounding a little muffled. Maybe just the microphone.
Yeah, let me try that.
Ah, then better.
That's better.
Thanks, Jay. I couldn't hear him either.
Wait, do a test again, Ethan.
Testing.
Well, I hate to say this to you, but you may need to speak up because I know you usually do already speak up.
Yeah. All right, I will try to speak louder. All right. For the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 program, Amendment 4 to the TIP proposes cost increases to 1 regional target and 2 statewide highway projects, the acceleration of paving on Route 2 in Acton, Littleton, and Boxborough, cost revisions to the Interstate 90 and Interstate 495 interchange project in Hopkinton, Westboro, funding adjustments to 2 Metro West Regional Transit Authority projects, the allocation of Federal Highway Administration carbon reduction funding by MassDOT to the MBTA's Quincy Bus Garage project, and the programming of Federal Transit Administration Section 5310 funding via MassDOT for the federal fiscal years 2024 community transit grants for operations. So if we can go on to the next slide. The comment period for this item began on January 22nd, 2024, and recently concluded on February 12th, 2024. There was 1 public comment received during that comment period from the Interstate 495 and Metro West partnership that expressed support for changes for the following projects in their area, including the reconstruction of Foster Street project in Littleton, the bridge replacement of Route 27 over Route 9 in Natick, and Acton, Boxborough, and Littleton's pavement preservation on Route 2 project. We can go on to the next slide. MPO staff are requesting that the board votes to endorse Amendment 4 with that in mind.
All right. Can I get a motion and second to endorse and open up to questions for Ethan? Aaron and then Brian.
A motion to endorse Amendment 4.
Brian?
It's my great honor to second the commissioner's motion.
All right. Any questions for Ethan? Aaron, do you have a question or is that your hand just let? All right. Okay. Any questions? All right. Seeing none. Dave, you want to read the roll, please?
Yes, absolutely. Steve Wolfel.
Yes.
John Bouchard.
John Bouchard, yes.
John Romano.
John Romano, yes.
Sandy Johnston.
Sandy Johnston, yes.
Eric Barassa. Will return. Brian Kane.
Kane, yes.
Len Diggins.
Diggins, yes.
Jen Rowe.
Jen Rowe, yes.
Jim Fitzgerald.
Fitzgerald, yes.
Eric Molinari.
Eric Molinari, yes.
David Kozis.
David Kozis, yes.
John Alessi.
John Alessi, yes.
Aaron Shute.
Aaron Shute, yes.
Tom Bent.
Tom Bennett, yes.
Dennis Giambetti. Darlene Wynn.
Dennis Giambetti, yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Darlene Wynn, yes.
Thank you as well. Tom O'Rourke.
Tom O'Rourke, yes.
Returning just to check on Eric Barassa.
Yeah, sorry, my mouse didn't work for a second. Eric Barassa, yes.
Reason, thank you. The motion carries. Thank you. Back to you, Mr.
All
Chair.
right. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ethan. We'll see you in a little bit. Next item is agenda 13. It's updates on the use of conveyal and disparate impact and disproportionate burden mitigation TIP project scoring. Betsy and Sri Lanka, please take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everyone. My name is Srilekha Murthy, and I'm here with my colleague Betsy Harvey to provide some updates on 2 concurrent work efforts that focus on destination access in the Transportation Improvement Program, the UPWP study, the use of conveyal in TIP project scoring, and disparate impact mitigation analysis we are conducting to address the disparate impacts found in the current LRTP Destination 2050. Both are being done in coordination as they assess TIP projects and use Conveil to do so. Next slide, please. One more. So I'm going to start with a recap on what these two work efforts are. Excuse me. The study applying Conveil to TIP project scoring is exploring Conveil's usefulness for scoring projects based on whether they improve access to various destinations. At the end of this study, we will share recommendations for using Conveil to score projects on destination access. This is a unique study as it is one of the first MPO projects to explore Conveil's application to MPO work. And as such, we are developing rules, so to speak, and standard processes for using Conveil, and lessons we learn will be applied to future uses. So I'll turn it over to Betsy to talk about the disparate impact mitigation work.
Okay, so next slide, thank you. Back in the summer of this past summer, when the MPO approved the LRTP Destination 2050, we identified 6 disparate impacts and disproportionate burdens that would likely result from the projects in the LRTP. Now, these are impacts that would disproportionately harm minority and low-income communities, and federal regulations require us to mitigate those disparate impacts and disproportionate burdens, which at the time we had mentioned that we plan to do so through the projects that we program in the upcoming TIP, starting with this year's TIP. Because these projects are related to destination access, these impacts related to destination access and travel time, we decided to use Conveil to determine whether any TIP scenario could mitigate those disparate impacts. So we're finishing those analyses now, and we'll present the results at the plan to when that's confirmed at an upcoming March TIP committee meeting to give you all the opportunity to consider them as you discuss your TIP scenarios later in March at subsequent MPO meetings. Because both the study and the disparate impact mitigation analysis both look at destination access impacts of TIP projects with Conveil, we are coordinating both efforts and trying to be consistent as possible in the analysis process. And that's why we're presenting them together today so that we can continue that type of coordination. Next slide, please. So I want to talk a little bit about Conveil and destination access in case you need a refresher or not familiar with the topics. Destination access measures the ability of people to get to where they want to go. So it really focuses on transportation's benefit to people rather than on the system itself. The image on the screen the darker blue indicates that the people who live in those areas have access to more jobs within a 60-minute transit trip than people who live in the lighter blue areas. So Conveil is a tool that enables us to do that analysis, to analyze change in access across a variety of travel modes, whether it's looking at bike access, walking, car, or by transit. We can build any number of detailed scenarios and compare their impacts, which makes Conveil a valuable tool for TIP scoring and for disparate impact analysis. We're making those comparisons are really important. We can conduct regional analysis, like what we're doing for our disparate impact analysis, or we can do single point origin analysis, like for TIP project scoring. And we also can assess impacts on different demographic groups based on where they live, which is also why it makes it a really good tool for looking at equity impacts. So with that, I will hand it back to Srilekha to talk more about the TIP project scoring study.
Thanks, Betsy. Next slide, please. So on the screen, you can see our timeline for the TIP project scoring study. In the fall and winter, we worked on selecting projects for the study and putting them into Conveil. And we coordinated this with the disparate impact mitigation work so that the Conveil analyses for both efforts use the same project information where there is overlap. Then in the winter, we set our analysis parameters, which again, we coordinated with the disparate impact mitigation analysis, and I'll go over what these parameters are in a couple of slides. Our next steps are to run Conveil for each project and develop recommendations on how to score projects for their ability to improve access to destinations for the people they serve, which we will present to the MPO at the conclusion of the study later this year over the summer. Next slide, please. So on the screen, you can see the list of projects that we will be running Conveil on for the TIP project scoring study. We selected projects from the federal fiscal years 2024 to 28 TIP that represent the range of the types of projects that the MPO funds, from fixed street transit to microtransit to complete streets, off-street paths, bridge reconstruction, intersection improvements, and climate resilience improvements. We also selected different sizes of projects. We want to be able to stress test Conveil to better understand its capabilities and to be able to report which types and sizes of projects it could be useful for scoring. We haven't started Conveil runs yet, so if you have any feedback on our selection, we would welcome it at the end of the presentation. Next slide, please. So now we'll talk a little bit about the analysis parameters that we've chosen for our work. A destination access analysis requires several parameters. As we've defined them for the study, we've kept many of them the same for the disparate impact mitigation work, again, to maintain consistency. So first, we need to select a travel mode, either walk, bicycle, transit, or car. We can analyze all of them, which allows us to compare results across modes. As part of this, we also defined a bicycle level of traffic stress, which routes are considered bikeable based on the quality of the bicycle infrastructure and road speed. Next, we need the spatial location of destinations. We used jobs, healthcare, education, parks, and essential places. You may recall that many of these are the same destinations that were used in the disparate impact analysis in Destination 2050, and many of them are being used again in the mitigation analysis we are now conducting. Again, this allows us to be consistent with how we analyze access across all MPO work. We also need to set travel time cutoffs, which is how much time we give people to access a destination, such as a 30-minute drive or a 45-minute transit trip. Travel time cutoffs differ between destinations, so some destinations, like jobs, may have a higher cutoff time than others, such as emergency healthcare. Then we need the spatial locations of where people in our region live if we want to analyze differences between demographic groups. And finally, we need the spatial locations and extents of transportation projects. So I'll turn it back to Betsy to go over some of our findings to date.
Great, thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the findings about the using Conveil that we found as we've been working on these two work efforts. We found, of course, that it has been really critical to maintain consistency. It makes it much easier for us to do the analysis. And if we're going to repeat any of these analyses, that we can do that easily using the same kind of standard methods and destinations that we're using. Other strengths we've found is that Conveil has a really pretty fast runtime. Once we put the projects, able to put the projects in Conveil and have our destinations, it operates pretty quickly. We can produce, as I mentioned, results by demographic groups, which is really important for equity analyses. And it's also really flexible in terms of the scale of analysis. It can analyze impacts to kind of smaller areas, so small project areas around a particular street, but also impacts to an entire region, which is really critical for the wide variety and different types of work that we do. But like any analysis tool, there are some limitations that I think it's important for us to be aware of as we're thinking about and when we see the results that will come as we finish up these work efforts. Conveil is really good at modeling kind of traditional projects like complete streets improvements or a new off-street bike path. But because it only has two main levers, changes in speed and adding or taking away a new connection like a new bike path, it can't measure kind of all the benefits of a transportation project. It's really narrowly focused on the potential of someone to access a destination by a particular mode from a location. So if we don't have that speed or connection information, a project really can't be analyzed in Conveil. And so you will see in some instances that we're not able to put certain projects in Conveil simply because they don't kind of affect either speed or they don't add a new connection. It also is also a bit of a kind of a challenge to model some non-traditional projects such as microtransit and bike share. But we are, really emphasizing making sure that we can figure out how to do those because they are really critical to this MPO and important projects for our region. And so there's still some things that we can explore to kind of have Conveil be representative of the types of projects that we fund. There's also some things that we haven't modeled with Conveil that we think could be represented in the future, but really need some more in-depth research, such as the impact of kind of smaller scale complete streets, characteristics like curb bump out, speed bumps, signal upgrades, et cetera. So we really want to understand what are kind of the impact of those sorts of improvements on traffic speed, on bus speed, on walking and biking speed, and therefore the ability of people to access different destinations. Next slide, please. Finally, just want to kind of outline the sorts of work products that we anticipate producing for both of these work efforts. At the conclusion of the TIP scoring study, we plan on putting together a public online data repository hosted on GitHub, which will allow anyone interested to see the data we used and to see our analysis process. We'll also write a report for the MPO, which will describe our findings on the utility of Conveil for scoring projects based on whether they improve access to destinations, and recommendations for a scoring scale if we choose to score projects on destination access using Conveil in future TIP cycles. For the disparate impact mitigation work, we will be producing a handout that shows the results of Conveil and how projects in the TIP would improve access to destinations for which we identify disparate impacts in the LRTP Destination 2050. And we think it's really important for us to be developing end products that are not only useful internally, but also for other MPOs and state DOTs as a set of best practices. Because in our literature review, looking at whether other states and MPOs have done to measure and score access in their TIPs and STIPs, Conveil doesn't seem to be very widely used at this point. So we really have an opportunity here to be an early adopter of this really important software and also share our knowledge and experiences to other planning agencies who are looking to engage in similar work, but may not know where to start. Next slide. So thank you for your time and welcome any questions or feedback about these two work efforts. And I'll pass it back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you both. Anyone have any questions? Jen?
Thanks for this presentation. Really exciting to learn about this tool. My one question I had as you were presenting, you mentioned that this has a fast run times. I was curious if you could speak a little bit more to how fast we were talking. I'm just kind of my head figure out like, is this something we can run multiple times throughout the TIP season to like study the different impacts? I'm assuming this is not a thing that could be run while we are debating the concepts, like at an actual meeting. But kind of where is it in that thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Jen. I don't want to like promise that this runs at a particular speed simply because this is the first time that we're kind of working with Conveil kind of in real time in terms of the development of the TIP. I can pass it though to Tanner, though Tanner Bonner's been working as an analyst on our work, so I think he'd better insight into that.
Tanner, you still on?
Yeah, thanks, Betsy. And great question. I'd say generally most of the scenarios that we run, which our runs you have to have multiple scenarios, generally take pretty much between 3 to 20 minutes, depending on the server load, the complications of like how many modifications are in a scenario and other factors like that. But it's pretty quick.
All right, you all set, Jen? All right, anyone else have any questions? Jim, go ahead. Jim, it's Cheryl.
Apologies. I was just having trouble finding the unmute button. Can you clarify a little bit how the tool calculates transit travel time speed improvements?
I'm going to let Tanner answer this one as well.
Yeah, so when we're making modifications in Conveil, we can scale a particular segment of a route or multiple routes by some factor, 1.3 or 0.7, or dependent on whatever intervention is being made. In terms of how Conveil under the hood treats those modifications and has that result in some sort of impact is a little less known to us, but is something that we're working on understanding more about technically.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anyone else? All right, thank you both, and we look forward to hearing when you guys are farther along in coming back to MPO and provide more information. All right, let's move to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 14, Tip Readiness Days update. Ethan, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is my audio better?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. Okay, thank you. So for the next presentation that I have this morning, this is the Federal Fiscal Years 2025 to 29 TIP Project Readiness Updates. If we can go on to the next slide, I'll talk specifically about what the contents of today's presentation are, starting off with what TIP Readiness Days are and why we provide a readiness update as part of developing each annual TIP cycle. Then I will go into the detail of exactly what specific project level updates are as part of the fiscal 25-29 cycle, namely looking at projects that have either been recommended for delay, flagged as having high or moderate risk either by MassDOT staff or MPO staff, and any projects that have seen cost increases beyond a 10% threshold, which is consistent with the levels set by the TIP Ad Hoc Cost Committee some years ago to identify any projects that may be subject to the need for reevaluation and reconsideration on the TIP at the discretion of board members. We'll also look at how these delays and any cost increases impact funding availability for new projects in the new 5-year cycle for 25-29 and culminate in some discussion. And as has been mentioned other times throughout this meeting, there will be further, more in-depth discussion on how these updates relate to the long-term strategic implications of programming new projects at this afternoon's TIP Process Readiness and Engagement Committee. If we can go on to the next slide, let's provide a little bit of background in terms of what materials have been provided. On the meeting calendar and posted before this meeting is the Federal Fiscal Years 25 to 29 TIP Project Readiness Scenario in PDF and HTML formats. This scenario shows all of the regional target funded projects that are currently programmed in the Federal Fiscal Years 2024 to 28 TIP, with a legend at the bottom to show what the color coding reflects for any recommendations for delay, flags for risk, or any according cost increases. The list of new projects under consideration, which do not factor into the grand totals at the bottom of that sheet, are highlighted in blue as well if you would like to look at those as well. But we will not be talking about those projects today. So if we can go on to the next slide, let's start talking about exactly what readiness updates are and why we do them. So project readiness updates reflect any changes in a project's cost, scope of work, and the schedule with which it may be delivered for any currently programmed projects. The program year for most projects on the TIP reflects the year at which that project may advertise for construction, and funding may be obligated to advance it. These updates are conveyed through correspondence that MPO staff have with their partners at various state agencies, not only including MassDOT, but also Department of Conservation and Recreation, Department of Environmental Protection, the MBTA, and other RTAs, and of course our local partners, namely municipal project proponents, and also their project consultant teams. The main forum through which all of this information is aggregated and dispersed is MassDOT's multi-day TIP Readiness Days effort. The TIP Readiness Days that MassDOT hosts covers a far broader range of projects and topics than what I will be presenting here today, as it reviews all projects within the Commonwealth, including for other MPOs and the statewide highway program. Today, we will only be talking about projects that are funded by the Boston Region MPO's Regional Target Project program, not necessarily statewide highway projects. However, there are some statewide highway projects that may have intersections, and I will get to them as we go through this discussion. So with that, let's talk about how these updates on the next slide relate to TIP development. So as I just mentioned, this is only MPO funded projects because the reason why we do this is to lay out and account for these changes on the projects that are already funded before we start considering what new projects are available. The reason for that, if we go on to the next slide, is to kind of cover a timeline of TIP development here. We are functionally about halfway through the TIP development cycle for federal fiscal years 25 to 29. As now that applications have closed and scoring is underway, this readiness update provides the foundation and baseline upon which, once these scores are in hand and presented at the March 7th meeting, we can start talking about new programming scenarios for those projects at the end of March. We are about 2 months away now from where there will be a potential release of a draft TIP for public review on April 18th, with targeted endorsement on June 6th. So with that, if we can go on to the next slide, let's start talking about what this baseline really looks like. Really looking at, on this slide, what the funding availability before accounting for any programming amounts looks like. So in previous and more recent TIP development cycles, there have been much more significant changes in funding availability year to year, thanks to the passage of things like the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This year, given that the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law continues to provide additional resources to the Commonwealth, there have been no changes to funding levels between federal fiscal years 2024 and 2028 versus what was presented to members during that development cycle. Namely, we are still looking at funding availability of $128.43 million in federal fiscal year 25, $125.29 million in 2026, $155.13 million in 2027, and in 2028, $158.05 million. The new year of the TIP, federal fiscal year 2029, has a total apportionment of regional target funding before accounting for anything programmed against it of $161.03 million, and this increase reflects an accounting of different inflation factors as well. So again, there isn't really any significantly new information here versus previous years on the policy side, driving major changes. On the next slide, I'd like to start off by showing what the bottom line is for the readiness updates that I'll be getting into. Given that the funding levels are fairly static, there haven't been any changes on the overall amount of funding available, but due to a large amount of delays in the federal fiscal year 25 and 6 program, there is a very significant amount of funding available for programming projects in federal fiscal years 2025 and 26. Inversely, there is very little, in fact, negative funding to a significant degree in federal fiscal years 27 and 28, and given advanced construction schedules for continuing long-term funding priorities for MPO projects, and after accounting for set-asides like transit transformation, there's about $52 million, or I'm sorry, exactly $51.19 million left in federal fiscal year 2029 for any new projects that may go in that year. Specifically, in federal fiscal year 2025, we are looking at funding availability of about 56.5% of bandwidth, which comes out to $72.61 million. In federal fiscal year 2026, we are looking at $34.68 million, or 27.7% of total funding unprogrammed. In 2027, because many of the delays have been pushed into that year, we are looking at a deficit of negative $80.69 million, which is negative 52% below, I should say overprogrammed. And in federal fiscal year 2028, again, because of delays out of 26 and 27, we are looking at a deficit of $26.04 million, a deficit of 16.5%. And 2029 has nearly 1/3, or 31.8% of its funding unprogrammed. To reiterate again, $51.19 million for any new projects that might be looking for funding in that year. So with that, let's start going into exactly why these changes are shown looking at the readiness overview. I mentioned that many projects were delayed, and also many projects have been flagged with cost increases as well, which have led to those deficits in the outer years. There were 11 projects with cost changes of 10%, greater than that aforementioned MPO threshold for potential reconsideration of funding, and also for amendments for future cases once the TIP is adopted. 10 of those projects saw cost increases. There is, however, one project that actually saw a cost decrease beyond a delta of 10%. There have been 12 projects that have been flagged at risk for future delay. Now, when I say risk, I don't necessarily mean that these projects will be delayed, but rather that a delay may either happen if certain needs are not met in the near term, or that if a project were to be delayed, even if there is no imminent risk to schedule, that delay would have significant impacts on the financial program itself. For example, a large-scale project may be on track, but it may be flagged for risk. If something goes wrong, it may cause spillover effects into the rest of the program. Among those 12 projects, we have 7 that have been flagged as moderate risk. If you're looking at the spreadsheet, those have the orange text, and the text that is red shows the 5 high-risk projects. They're also separated here in this presentation for reference as well. There are also 14 projects recommended for delay, the majority of which are found in the federal fiscal years 25 and 26 programs. So if we can move on to the next slide, before we get into 25 through 2028, let's talk about federal fiscal year 2024, the year that does not appear in the next development tip, but needs to be settled before we move on to that next tip. So the good news for federal fiscal year 2024 is that there are no regional target projects that are currently designated as needing delay. There are 2 projects that are worth mentioning within this section, however. The first is the Newton-Weston Bridge rehabilitation of Commonwealth Avenue, Route 30, over the Charles River. It has seen an 11% increase in cost from $21.85 to $24.18 million as the project has continued to make progress on design. There is a medium risk flag for this project to stay in fiscal 24, as it now has additional National Environmental Policy Act or NEPA permitting needs that should be addressed. In Peabody, there is the multi-use path construction project of the Independence Greenway at Interstate 95 and Route 1. This is a different project from another Peabody Independence Greenway project we'll be talking about later in this presentation. This has not seen any significant cost increases or changes here. Rather, it is only being flagged for a medium risk of delay to federal fiscal year 2025, as it is seeing additional permitting needs for Chapter 91, which is the Massachusetts Public Waterfront Act, which is an environmental permit set. So with that, let's start moving on to the next years for federal fiscal years 25 to 28, starting with delayed projects. This first project is a somewhat complicated affair in that this is the Boylston Street project for the city of Boston, which goes from the intersection of Brookline Avenue to Park Drive and Ipswich Street. The reason for this complication and the delay from federal fiscal year 25 to 26 is the project may actually be separated in 2, with one section potentially still staying in federal fiscal year 2025, being the intersection of Brookline Ave and Park Drive, which is on DCR-owned property, the Department of Conservation and Recreation, and the separate section to the east, more in the Fenway area, being delayed so that it may be coordinated with a development at 1400 Boylston Street, which is near the Star Market in Fenway. So in order to coordinate with those developments and various DCR needs, and of course right-of-way permitting on this project, the project has been tentatively recommended for a delay into federal fiscal year 2026, and things may be subject to change as items develop between MassDOT, the City of Boston, Department of Conservation and Recreation, and of course the MPO to accommodate that. In Chelsea, there is a targeted safety improvements and related work project on Broadway, currently in federal fiscal year 2025, going to 2026. Not only has this project been witnessed a 1-year delay, but it has also seen a 55% cost increase from $6.32 million to $9.81 million. This is the result of a 75% design submission. And the reason for the delay is that there is separated sewer work that is underway in the project area, and this project cannot advance until that sewer separation has been completed. In Hingham, there is a federal fiscal year 25 project also recommended for delay to 2026 that has seen a similar, although greater scale, cost increase. This is the improvements on Route 3A from Otis Street and Cole Road, including the Summer Street and Rotary from Rockland Street to the George Washington Boulevard. This project has seen an increase from $15.02 million to $33.75 million, which is a approximately 125% increase. The project was delayed as there were some lagging submissions towards the project's 75% design deadline, which is this month. I can say that as of this morning, I actually received notification that the town has completed their 75% design and it is awaiting submission to MassDOT. However, the scale of the project and the difficulty of obtaining right-of-way plans for a project of this degree is still complicating matters, and this project is still subject to discussion and has been tentatively designated for a delay to federal fiscal year 26. With regard to the 125% cost increase, the former cost estimate for this project was based on a 2019 estimate for its 25% design. It's pre-COVID, so it largely is reflected due to inflationary pressures. So moving on to the next slide. This brings us into the federal fiscal year, we still are in, I should say, the federal fiscal year 2025 program for the TIP. However, these are projects that have been recommended for delay that are beyond 1 year. So this first project is in 2025 currently and is recommended for delay to 2027. This is Everett's reconstruction of Beecham Street project. The reason for this project's delay here was coordination with freight rail operators in the project area and right-of-way issues that are also resulting from that need for coordination. In Lynn, with the rehabilitation of Essex Street, design progress on this project has also been slowed, and there are a significant amount of right-of-way concerns throughout the project area, given the fairly large limits and scope of work. Given the large limits and the nature of this area as well, there is a lot of intersection control issues in the project, which is reflected in intersection control evaluations and different coordination needs there that need to happen. So again, this is a 2-year delay from federal fiscal year 2025 to 27. There is a federal fiscal year 2025 to 28 delay, which is Ashland's rehabilitation and rail crossing improvements on Cherry Street project. This project was previously delayed in prior tip cycles from federal fiscal year 24 to 25. It is seeing further delay to 28 as progress on design has not yet been made since the prior meeting that MassDOT has had with the town since May of 2023. This project is still subject to a need for town meeting approval and also requires further coordination with the MBTA and Federal Railroad Administration over federal quiet zone requirements as well. We can go on to the next slide. We then move into the federal fiscal year 26 project delays. This first project is Belmont's Community Path Phase 1 project, recommended for delay from federal fiscal year 26 to 27. The project is still advancing along in design and is approaching a design public hearing. However, the project has been recommended for 1 year of delay as it is utilizing an underpass under the MBTA's Fitchburg line, which has complicated right-of-way permits for the project and coordination with rail operators in the area. In a similar vein, in federal fiscal year 26, this was a project that was funded by the MPO that was new to the federal fiscal year's 24-28 tip. This is Boston's bridge preservation project for Cambridge Street over the MBTA. Similarly, it has been recommended for a 1-year delay as there is a need to obtain a CSX freight rail permit that was not previously accounted for in the project schedule. In Salem and Peabody, there is another 1-year delay for the Boston Street Improvements project there, with a corresponding cost increase of about 84%. This increasing from $14.17 million to $26.12 million. This project is still approaching a 75% design estimate. However, as that 75% is neared, there's been a highlighted need to revise that cost estimate beyond the 25% figure. This project does have a 25%, and that was reflected in the original cost estimate, but as with the Hingham project mentioned earlier, that is a 25% cost estimate from 2019. There are also approximately 150 easements within the project area, which requires extensive right-of-way coordination, along with other historical permitting needs in the project limits. And if we can go on to the next slide, staying in federal fiscal years 2026 again, this next project is Weston's reconstruction on Route 30 project, which has seen a cost increase of 26% from $16.42 million to $20.74 million. This project still requires town meeting approvals and revised right-of-way plans. A submission of a 75% design delivery was delayed from November 2023 due to contractual issues between the town and its consultant, and is now not expected until November of 2024, hence the recommendation for a delay. In Woburn, which is a 2026 project for roadway and intersection improvements at the Woburn Common, that has also been recommended for delay for federal fiscal year 2027, as intersection control evaluations for the project are not yet completed, and right-of-way plans that have been revised are still required for the project to advance. This next project starts its funding in federal fiscal year 2026, but is funded across 2 years in the TIP. This is Ipswich's resurfacing and relayed work on Central and South Main Streets projects. This project in the 24-28 TIP began with funding in 2025 to 26, but during that year's readiness days, the project was delayed to 26 and 27. It is recommended for delay again to 2027 and 28. The progress towards right-of-way plans again for this project has been slowed by impacts of the town's historic common area and also Article 97 public lands preservation permits within the limits and scope of work. Moving on to the next slide, we have our last 2 delays here, these being Brookline's rehabilitation of Washington Street. This is a sizable 2027 project recommended for delay to 2028 with a budget of around $30.16 million. The main reason for the delay for this project is that there is a constrained roadway width in the area, which is limiting the ability to accommodate certain design components, and also the project's limits currently intersect with different MBTA service routes that require further coordination. Also, the total limits of the project are still being discussed with regard to where intersections and points of conclusion may happen, and the project has not yet reached 25% design as a result. In Lynn, I mentioned earlier when we were discussing projects that are funded in 2029, that funding amount would involve some advanced construction projects. This Lynn Western Rehabilitation of Western Avenue is one such project. It is funded by the MPO across several federal fiscal years, starting in 2027 and going through 2029. It has been recommended for a 1-year delay to 2028 and 2030, as the project has not yet completed its design public hearing. And just as with the other Lynn Essex Street project, there is a significant amount of parking and other easements in the project area that require a large volume of right-of-way coordination as a result of it. There is also a 12% cost increase, mostly resulting from inflationary pressures as the project is delayed out a few years, going from a current budget estimate of $40.98 million in the TIP to $45.9 million. Again, that is because of the delay and the inflation results there. If we can move on to the next slide, let's go into some of the high delay risk projects. Again, these are not projects recommended for delay. These are projects that may have difficulty staying in their current federal fiscal year if certain needs are not met. For Wilmington's reconstruction on Route 38 project from 62 to the Woburn City line, right-of-way plans are still not yet submitted for this project, and its current advertisement date is late federal fiscal year 2025. Given that this project has a budget of $22.82 million, if a deadline is missed and that project is delayed from fiscal 25 to 26, this would have a significant financial impact on the MPO's 2026 regional target program. Malden Spot Pond Brook Greenway project, which is also currently in federal fiscal year 2027, has been flagged as high risk as the project does not yet have an approved schedule submitted and no design submissions have been made since the last scoping meeting between MassDOT and the city in August of 2023. This was a new project funded under the 2024 to 28 TIP development cycle. There was a 25% design that was developed by the designer at the time of application, but MassDOT does not yet have that in hand. And given the scope of work also involves intersection with Article 97 lands, there may be additional permitting needs for this project that could result in future delays. This next project, as with Malden Spot Pond Brook Greenway project, is also one that was funded new to the TIP under federal fiscal years 24-28, this being Westwood and Norwood's reconstruction of Canton Street to University Drive. This has been flagged with a high delay risk as the scope of work has changed from what was evaluated by the MPO there. The project previously accounted for the rehabilitation and elevation of a bridge near some of the Route 128 and University Park business park area, which is no longer included in the project. As a result, the cost of this project may change, whether increase or be reduced, and given the scope of work has changed, the evaluation that it may have received may have been different with the bridge now omitted. It also may require additional permitting considerations or design submissions to account for this. If we go on to the next slide, we have two more high delay risk projects. Neither of these were projects that were necessarily flagged by MassDOT for high delay risk, but these are ones that the MPO has flagged. This first project is Wakefield's Comprehensive Downtown Transportation Improvement Project. There is an 11% increase here for this project from $16.58 million to $18.44 million. The main reason for flagging this project is that the project still requires an approved schedule, and the Wakefield-Linfield Rail Trail Extension, project number 607329, is recommended for deactivation to be split into two segments on the municipal boundaries. The reason why that is relevant to this project is that when this project was initially evaluated back in the 2023 to 27 cycle, during which it was not selected, the rail trail component, which was contained within Wakefield, was incorporated and funded under project 607329. Given that the project is recommended for deactivation and a split, the Linfield section will be a separate project, but the Wakefield section may be incorporated into this line item in the future as well, and functionally bundling it. That is still pending further discussion with MassDOT Highway Division and also with the town of Wakefield there, but it is worth flagging as if this component were to be bundled in, the cost would likely increase for the project. The next project is Boston's reconstruction of Rutherford Avenue from City Square to Sullivan Square. This project has not seen any cost increases or recommendations for delay, but the project has been flagged as high risk, as any future delays to this project would adversely impact TIP funding levels across 5 different program years to a very significant degree. The project is currently funded in federal fiscal years 2027 and will be funded through 2032. The advanced construction schedule for this project also currently has MPO funding obligations in 2031 and 32 of about $45 million per year in those years. MassDOT is still waiting on a formal design submission for 25%, though the project remains on schedule, though MassDOT is also looking for a revised schedule to reflect recent changes in the scope of work. Moving on to the moderate risk projects. Woburn's intersection construction at Route 3, which is Cambridge Road with Bedford Road and South Bedford Street, has been flagged for moderate risk and seen a 74% cost increase from $1.98 million to $3.44 million. It recently cleared 25% design, hence the cost increase. A 75% design submission is expected to be obtained in this spring, but right-of-way permitting needs in the project area could lead to a delay out of federal fiscal year 25 into 26. Unlike the aforementioned Wilmington project with a budget of $22.8 million, even this revised budget of $3.44, given that it is lesser, would have a smaller financial impact on the MPO's funding availability in 2026 should a delay manifest, hence that moderate risk flag. Weston's intersection improvements at Boston Post Road and Wellesley Street also similarly saw a cost increase from $2.19 million to $3.36 million, a 48% cost increase, as it recently achieved a 75% design submission. However, there are also still needs for revised right-of-way plans that remain overdue for this project. The next project is Chelsea's Park and Pearl Street reconstruction project. This project is somewhat interesting in that it actually has an anticipated advertisement date based on its current schedule of federal fiscal year 2026, despite the fact that it is currently programmed in federal fiscal year 2027. The project is still undergoing intersection control evaluation and right-of-way reviews, and also still requires a design public hearing. Given that Q1 federal fiscal year 2026 advertising date, however, the TIP date that is currently programmed for 27 still provides a fair amount of time for buffer, and in conversations with the city of Chelsea previously, that time would be utilized to conduct those necessary public engagement activities. On the next slide for the last 3 moderate risk flags, this next project is Everett's Multimodal and Safety Improvements on Route 16. This was a project that the MPO voted to fund in federal fiscal years 24 to 28, taking it out of the statewide highway program for MassDOT and funding it with regional target dollars. A schedule has not yet been set for this project, and right-of-way plans have not yet been submitted. However, the project is only flagged as a medium risk, as unlike many municipally oriented projects, which involve multiple consultants and designers potentially, it is internal to MassDOT, which may help to facilitate the speed at which those right-of-way submissions are made or the quality of those right-of-way submissions. The next project, similar to the Rutherford Avenue flag, but to a lesser extent, is Somerville's McGrath Boulevard construction project. This is another significant project funded across multiple federal fiscal years, with the current advanced construction schedule for the project being from 2027 to 2030, though it may be accommodated from 2027 to 29, depending on funding availability. Right-of-way and environmental permitting are still underway for this project, and it recently had a design hearing on Tuesday night to present to the public the scope. MassDOT may also be working with the city to pursue a federal discretionary grant to support the project further for its budget, but this project has been flagged as medium risk, as in addition to those permitting needs, if there are any changes to the scope of work or timeline for the project, it would have significant impacts on multiple years of the MPO's funding programs. This next project was another flag by the MPO, but not necessarily by MassDOT, which was for Swampscott's Rail Trail construction project in fiscal 2028. This was delayed out of federal fiscal year 27 into 28 last year. While it remains in 28 during this recommendation cycle, this project still does not yet have a submitted schedule for MassDOT, and design is still not yet at 25%. Utilities coordination is a major consideration for the construction of this project, given some of the areas with which it is crossing over the street and intersecting with overhead power lines. With that, we have two more projects, these being our cost changes only. So on the next slide, this next cost change is actually our cost decrease, which is Peabody's multi-use path construction of the Independence Greenway at I-95 and Route 1. This project has seen a cost decrease of 11% from $15.78 million to $13.97 million. That is because there has been a resubmission of the 25% design that happened in July 2023, and it will likely reach 75% this August. Now, the project's budget has been revised downward slightly. However, it did see an increase in the federal fiscal year's 24-28 tip readiness days from 6.3 million to that $15.78 million figure. So the actual extent of this decrease here is not as great as its original increase last year. For Milford's next project, the next project I should say with a cost increase is Milford's rehabilitation of Route 16 from Route 109 to Beaver Street. This is increased by 39% from 9.76 million to 13.55 million, resulting from a resubmission of the 25% design and an anticipated 75% design submission in July 2024. The last estimate for this project was from March 2020 for that cost. So again, if we go on to the next slide, this is the bottom line impact that all of those changes I just listed have on funding availability in the federal fiscal years 25 to 29 TIP. A large amount of funding available due to delays in federal fiscal years 25 and 26, but because many of those delays moved projects into 27 and 8, a severe deficit of funding in 27 and 8 of negative 80.69 and negative $26.04 million there. Also, with advanced construction for many projects still under consideration for federal fiscal year 29, and after considering items like the Community Connections Program, the Transit Transformation Program, and the Bike Share Support Programs, there is around $51.19 million remaining in federal fiscal year 2029 to account for any new projects that have been submitted to the TIP for those years. So with that, I'll go into some next steps before I'll open the floor for our first batch of discussion. Let's talk about some future changes that may be seen over the next couple of months. So there are still 2 months to go before the draft TIP is anticipated to be released on April 18th. This baseline of the TIP project readiness days is not necessarily fixed, as some of the projects, be they listed here today or not listed here today, may see additional cost changes, be they increases or decreases. Some of the proponents of these projects I've just listed, just as I mentioned with Hingham submitting a 75% design this morning, may take action to mitigate some of the near-term delay or risk flags that I've also identified today, which may change things as we develop the TIP. TIP readiness days is meant to be a foundation and a snapshot to discuss project scenarios in subsequent MPO board meetings, and the discussion as well that I think should be focused on, or at least considered, would also be which of the projects I just listed and their proponents should present to the MPO board on why cost changes were seen or why scope changes were made to their project versus what was initially applied for, based on the findings of the MPO's TIP Cost Change Committee and one of the rules adopted there for any projects with a change in scope or a change in cost beyond 10%. Moving on to the next slide, I would also like to flag just and contextualize this event in relation to future meetings. Again, this afternoon, there is a TIP Process Engagement and Readiness Committee meeting at 1 p.m. to discuss any of the underlying readiness trends that are driving a lot of these projects, where we will also discuss the potential for either one or more meetings in March to discuss the implications for programming scenarios. This will basically be a more detailed environment with which to ask more questions about specific projects or the implications of these changes. On March 7th, we'll be talking about how all of the new projects under consideration for federal fiscal years 25 to 29 have been scored. On March 21st, will be the first meeting to discuss and vote on preliminary programming scenarios for all new projects, with the adoption of a final scenario anticipated for the April 4th MPO board meeting to culminate in that release of a draft TIP on April 18th. In the meantime, and at any time over these next 2 months, MPO staff are available to answer any questions you may have on either these needs presented here or any future ones in the near term. So with that, happy to
All right,
take
Brian,
questions.
you want to start us off? Brian, I think you're muted. All right, I'll go to Eric, Aaron, and then Ken, and then Jim Fitzgerald.
Yeah. First, just Ethan, thank you as always. It was a tour de force of project summaries. And
Hello.
is this, I have a couple of questions, but first, this seems like sort of the biggest unprogrammed amount of funds we've ever had. Is that correct? In 2025?
I believe I was not present for it, but the Green Line extension funding may have been a little bit higher. But yes, it is a very large amount compared to last year and prior years.
So this is a big challenge for us. This is going to be a challenging tip cycle about how we address the fact that so many projects have gone up in costs and also delay and are being pushed out. And I guess my question for you, Ethan, is I know one of the reasons we created the tipper committee was so that we can hear more from project proponents about that. Do we have a hard and fast rule that if your thing went up by more than 10%, you have to come to the committee and talk to us about it?
Very good question. So the rule that was voted on during the tip cost change committee, I believe back in 2021, was actually that those votes would be at the discretion of the MPO board, not the tip committee, to make those decisions there. So, and it is also on a project by project basis, I believe. I can find the exact language for that and then provide it, but I believe that was the rule. So it is a board level decision.
A board level decision of which project should come to the committee. Is that right?
It would be the board in that case if the board votes on it. With the committee, I think that would also be the choice of the committee. There could be two forms for it. Just noting that sorry for the confusion there. The TIP committee, because it came after that, is a separate entity, so not necessarily subject to that rule. So it's also both at the discretion of the board to have them come before the board and be reevaluated and potentially rescored for reconsideration and programming, and at the discretion of the TIP committee to have them discuss why those changes happened. But the TIP committee isn't a voting body that has direct decision-making power over board programming scenarios.
No, that's right. My memory is that we created the committee because this would be an opportunity, just given lots of questions and discussion, that it would be a more appropriate forum to kind of get into some of the details around why projects have gone up in cost. And I guess I certainly would be interested in hearing from some of the project proponents where it's not just inflation, it's like other things. And I think it'd be good for the group to better understand. I mean, there were a few of those that went up by like 80% or 100%. Like I think it'd be good for us to better understand what's going on there, and kind of do our due diligence on those projects. So that's one thing, and just maybe that's something that the committee can. I know we're having the committee this afternoon. We can discuss more of that today. The other question I have, Ethan, is on the schedule in front of us. Which of these meetings are we going to do in person? Have we decided that yet, or are you guys proposing some of these to be in person?
My understanding at this time is that tentatively the March 21st and the April 4th meetings may be a hybrid in-person and virtual topic. Or event, I should say.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All right, I think I heard Brian in the background. So Brian, I think your audio is working. So Brian, Aaron, Ken, and then we have Jim and David lined up. Brian, are you back on?
Yeah, my mic wasn't working. I put my comment in the chat. I'm all set, Steve. Thank you.
All right, Aaron.
Thank you. Erin Chu, Town of Brookline. Thank you, Ethan, for the summary. I'm sure we'll talk about this more at the meeting this afternoon, but I wanted to inquire about whether this is largely a budget balancing exercise or project risk. And I ask this because, some of the items for Washington Street specifically, I was a little surprised to see. The project limits haven't changed. We've been working with the MBTA on the road widths and the bus stops. We've had over 4 public meetings, many meetings with the partner agencies. And so I'm just wondering kind of where you and how you established risk, and are you talking with the municipalities?
Yes, good question. So the best way to answer this, I think, is to talk about MassDOT Tip Readiness Days and what that activity entails. It is a sort of all hands on deck event, is my understanding at MassDOT, which other folks may be able to provide insight into, which involves correspondence between the highway districts that are involved in the project manager, the program manager for the STIP, the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, the environmental division, the right-of-way division, and also the director's office and other bodies there. And each provides their own perspective and devises a final concluded recommendation at the official Tip Readiness Days, which varies from project to project given that information. Not all departments necessarily agree with one another on those recommendations until one is eventually decided.
So, John, do you want to weigh in on this at all, this specific question about Brookline?
Happy to weigh in on the process. I didn't write everything down that Brookline asked. I want to say, Ethan, number one is Brian Keane had offered. Tremendous job. I threw a lot of curveballs at you on this thing. Sorry about that. Well, my team did. Readiness, we don't look at cost. We look at readiness. We look at the risk for delivering the project, whether it's the design, the right-of-way, the permitting, what are the challenges to deliver the project from to where it is currently programmed. And as Ethan, went through each of the year 24, 25 through 28, et cetera, it was, we would flag a project as being, moderate risk for delivering within the year that it's programmed, or we might recommend a future year because we didn't think that everything could get done in the time frame that was available. And we do this as an exercise to assess deliverability of the project without regard to cost. And then we factor cost at the regional level. So that way we can look at scenarios to deliver the project and how any cost changes have impacted the schedule. But the cost really doesn't come into play until after we make our recommendation on deliverability. I didn't catch Erin's specific question. If I could, Erin.
Thank you, John. I think that helped just in terms of the sort of readiness criteria that you're looking at. And I was just pointing out some things that had been identified for Brookline. I don't think we need to go into sort of the specifics of our particular project. It was just sort of overarching, maybe our perspective and maybe some of the other municipalities' perspective of readiness might be a little different. There may be some nuance, but I understand it's a big team over there that's weighing in.
Right. Yeah, I think Ethan had a lot of the comments that had been discussed during Readiness Days, and in his comments section of his slide deck, and we might put in questions about a lot of design challenges. There was some MBTA intersections and proximity, impacts to parking, and that those were items that were still being discussed and hadn't been finalized yet. And that might be some of the items that we would flag, but I don't think there's any deal breakers. We didn't, draw a line in the sand and say this can't be delivered. We recommended it to a 28 for Washington Street because we feel that the community is doing a great job of, engaging with the abutters and the overall community and the stakeholders. And sometimes it just takes a little more time to get consensus and buy-in.
Derek, did you want to jump in on this project before I recognize Ken?
Yeah, I was just going to say, because I think it's relevant for all of them, that the notes do say, like John mentioned, that the project's not yet at 25% design, that there's a lot of right-of-way impacts and issues to be sorted through. But and being an outer year as well, 27, 28, we do this every year. We do Readiness Days on an annual basis. So if design progresses and it's found that, Erin, like you're saying, if there is a lot of progress, that it can always be revisited. So, certainly doesn't mean that, it can't change. I just wanted to throw that out there so folks know, this is something we do every year, and especially for the outer years if design progresses and it can move earlier, we always consider that option as well. So thank you.
All right, thanks, Eric. Ken, and then Jim, and then David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ethan, this is a lot of information, as other people have said. Can you put the slide that shows the just where it stands by year and what the gaps are? There we go. Thank you. So I just want to look at 2025. If you look at the projects that have got moved out versus the projects that are remaining, of that $56 million that is remaining, only one of those projects is an actual, what would be a non-state target project. That is the Peabody project at $14 million. The other project, about 40 million of the projects remaining of that 56 million are projects that were added in by the MPO because they weren't enough so they're basically state projects. So Jackson Square, which is a T project, Wilmington, Woburn, the Community Connections is still there. So the only remaining actual target project of that 56 million is the Peabody project. The projects that were delayed, Lynn, Hingham, Everett, Boylston Street, and Boston are municipal, target projects. So I think this is, if you look at it in that light, it's really even more concerning that only $14 million worth of target projects are now programmed in 2025. So I just wanted to point out this is a significant concerning issue. I do have a couple of suggestions, although if you look at 2027, it's overprogrammed because all these projects got shipped out. So there is a project in 2027, which is I think Norwood, which you have AC'd between 27 and 28. I would suggest that you actually move the 28 money into 27, reducing that deficit. There would be no reason to AC it if the money was available. I'm sorry, from 27 to 26. I'm sorry, you can move the money. So you would use up some more money in 2026, about $17 million, and reduce the deficit in 2027 if you did not AC it. And then there's a project that moved from 26 to 27, making the deficit in 27 worse, which is Cambridge Street, 612689. That is a MassDOT project. That was put in by the MPO because there was a gap. There were projects needed, but now it's in 2027 when you're way over budget. So why wouldn't you just take that out and say state, that's your project again, in effect. But just to go back to the my original point, this is extremely concerning. I think the issue, obviously there are lots of issues related to, project estimates, but the major issue that I think the TIP committee and this MPO has to face is, getting these projects moving and getting them developed, just because, and again, I appreciate what John said, this is MassDOT's view at this point, and rightly so, they know a lot about these projects, but I think the TIP committee can also take a look at seeing, okay, what are the risks of these projects? What are the problems? And actually drill down and see if any of these projects can be actually accelerated to ameliorate the issue of having these huge gaps in 2025 and 2026. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ken, Jim, David, and then Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just want to echo again Ethan's fantastic work on all this. It's a lot of information. And a lot of this has since been clarified, but kind of going back to, I think, what Aaron was getting at is that what we're seeing here is kind of MassDOT's interpretation of readiness, right? And so, I think it's important that the whole MPO understands what this is being presented as. And just wondering if this maybe gets to process of readiness days. And I realize there's a lot of projects that are kind of wholly managed by MassDOT, but the others, like the Brookline project, like our projects, I'm not going to necessarily talk about specific projects, but that maybe doesn't have that back and forth before this information is presented to the whole MPO the kind of opinions of the municipalities that are actually managing municipally sponsored projects and managing the advancement of designs that, while there's very specific milestones that are very huge, as it relates to kind of submittals to MassDOT, that doesn't mean there's not positive progress going on at the municipalities with the progression of these projects, whether they're, design refinements or progress in other aspects of projects that I think are worth kind of revisiting the readiness interpretation here with that kind of collaboration with the municipality. So I just wanted to throw that in there as well.
David?
Okay, thank you. So Ethan, the Newton Weston Bridge project and the Peabody project that you had a slide on near the beginning that are in 2024 right now, but were flagged as medium risk for a delay, which I'm not sure we've heard. I don't remember hearing that before. And I guess we need to know right away. But if we do find that the projects have to be moved a year into 2025, it could help with 2025, but then what does that mean for 2024? Does it mean suddenly we have $30 million hole in 2024 that needs to be filled with something? I'm a little lost with that. Thank you.
If I may, I might defer to Derek Schuster on that.
So wait a minute. I do not want to get in debate. This is the beginning of a discussion. We had readiness days. We have a meeting at 1 o'clock where we're going to have the tip stuff. We're not supposed to be trying to come up with solutions at this point. We're trying to have a level playing field of knowledge. And then this is the start of the process, as you said, Ethan. So I don't want to get into we should move this or we should do this or we should AC this. That's not where we're at right now. So I don't want to get into that right now. I want to hear from members about what their thoughts are, some concerns they have from readiness days. Obviously, as I said, there's a meeting in a half hour that I want to be cognizant of, and this is the start of the discussion. So I don't want to get into solving stuff now because that's not appropriate to talk about just yet. So,
okay, I
Brian,
was just asking if this was potentially a problem. That's all.
Yeah, no, Dave, I wasn't talking about that. I get a sense we're trying to solution stuff. I want you all to have the information you need to go back and work on your project or projects that impact your community. So if someone has an answer for David, please provide that now. What I don't want to get into is, like I said, solutioning right now. So does anyone have an answer for David? Schuster, are you going to answer David's question? Is that what you're... All right, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, we're not concerned about that project moving out this year. We're just noting the risks around environmental review and if there were right-of-way concerns on it, but we recommended 2024 because we think it's going to make 2024.
Thank you.
That helped you good, David?
Yes, it does. Thanks.
All right, Brian, you up again?
Yes, thanks, Stephen.
Yeah,
just want to note, I want to just express my agreement with Jim Fitzgerald. I think there was some confusion and some consternation on what we called this item in the agenda. It's not necessarily kind of fully baked. It's what MassDOT sort of thinks the project is at. It's what the highway department thinks the project is at without municipal confirmation. So I was a little perturbed, I guess, when I saw some of these things, but now hearing that we have to go back and talk to the communities that are managing it, I feel a little bit stronger. My question for you, Steve, and to the team is, I know we tend not to move money between years. If we had to move some money out of 25, what is the process to do that?
So like you said, Brian, we've never done it. I'm not sure that's something we want to do per se. I'm sure Ken and others have some thoughts about it. I don't know. I don't want to fathom a guess because I don't know, Brian. I think that's something that as the meeting happens this afternoon, if that's as part of the solution, we need to look at it and respond to that as we get into it. But like you said, I don't ever remember us really doing it. So I think that's something for Ethan to explore with us and Federal Highway and figure out like how you would do it. Because I honestly don't know, Brian. I really don't.
I appreciate that. Yeah,
I think what we have done, Brian, is we flexed it to the T. We've done that before when we haven't had roadway projects ready. That we've done several times, and that's always an option. I'm not saying that's what we should do now. I'm just saying, that's traditionally when we have had excess money, that's what we've done. And I'm sure from where you sit, that's not a bad thing either, Brian. So,
My basement looks great. Yeah,
great.
I would just ask, Ethan and the team to figure out what if there's a 2/3 vote, is it a majority vote? If we do it, blah, 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 all that stuff. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep. Ken.
Well, just to Brian's question about the mechanism, I mean, it would be possible if the state said, hey, we have enough projects in 2025, say, that we could use up that money on the state side. We could make a trade with you and say, okay, we'll take some of that money in 2025, and we'll give you back an equivalent amount of money in 2026 or something like this. So it would be some kind of agreement, provided that the state could use the money. I mean, if they had the projects that they could use it, whether it's a bridge, whatever it would be. I mean, that would be one way of doing it. There may be other ways. That way of doing it, you'd be able to just keep it within the Boston MPO. You wouldn't have to worry about any other MPOs in the state or anything like that, like moving money around among MPOs. That would be just something that the MPO and the state would agree to, basically.
And as you know, Ken, we've done stuff like that before, where not like total trades, but what we have done is where municipal projects that have had cost overruns or what have you, and there's a gap. If we've had state capacity in that MPO, we've used that and used it for municipal projects. So we have some history of doing that. Maybe not wholesale like you just suggested, Ken, but we have done, like I said, this is the start of the process. We got a lot to figure out. This is going to be a tough year, as Eric said. So, it's good to get all this stuff out of here because we're going to have a lot of work to do. Ethan and then Jen.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I did just want to mention real quick, because I did not mention this during my presentation, that again, this is only the regional target program for the Boston region. A lot of the readiness recommendations and the trends that we will be discussing in the TIP committee this afternoon are also impacting the other MPOs in the Commonwealth, and also critically the statewide highway program as well, and a lot of their projects too. So this is not isolated to just our region either. So it's still worth bearing discussion and consideration going forward.
Thanks, Ethan. Jen, did you drop off? Did you still want to talk, or did you take your hand down?
We can go over to Eric. Thank you, though.
Eric, go ahead.
Yeah. So just a process question, Ethan. So at our next MPO meeting, March 7th, you're also going to bring an evaluation of the new projects. Is that correct? Which would be sort of eligible for programming in 2029, right? Most likely.
Some of them, yes. It also includes the design projects and community connections in 25.
And the design, right? The design pilot. We're going to discuss that. The community connections projects. And the transit transformation, is that too, or are we not doing that yet?
Yes, we have one project that applied for the set aside in federal fiscal year 2025. There may be others, as mentioned previously, that might seek fill-in funding in fiscal 25, but that would be later.
And we might also get some updates from the municipalities and MassDOT about project costs and readiness. And so this chart in front of us could slightly change, right?
I would say it will change, but yes, likely slightly, perhaps greater.
All right. So then we'll talk about those new projects. We'll talk about the updates to these current projects, and we'll have another look at these sort of these gaps and these deficits. And then on the 21st, the idea would be that there would be a staff recommendation or a series of scenarios that would be brought.
Yes, so the 21st would be anticipated the preliminary scenarios, and one of the things that we're hoping to do with the TIP committee is to use the committee potentially on March 14th to get an early pass at that, and then potentially, as I'll discuss this afternoon, also having a committee meeting on the 28th to look at the preliminary scenarios that were voted on, revise them a little bit, and then bring them back for the final vote on April 4th. So April 4th will be when decisions are made on what the scenario looks like.
And then 21st and April 4th would be in-person / hybrid meetings so that we can presumably, likely information is also changing in between potentially those meetings, and it's just more of an opportunity to discuss those changes better in person with obviously a hybrid option there too. Okay. Just to frame the process a little bit moving forward.
Okay. Thanks, Eric. Brian?
Yeah, sorry, I forgot one question, Steve.
Yep.
One thing we talked about in the MOU committee is the fact that the MARPA formula that actually allocates these funds is likely way out of whack, given the population growth that Boston and this region have had relative to others. If the funding formula were changed, would the dollar amounts in the out years change, or when, and if anything, would those take effect?
So I don't know. I know that I believe Linda's running that whole process, Brian, but I don't know how close we are to any resolution on that. I don't think either Derek or Schuster, we didn't have any updates at MARPA about where that process is that I remember. Eric, I think you were there too. So I don't know, Brian, how close they are. So Eric, do you want to weigh in?
I mean, changing the MARPA formula for how the federal construction funds flow to the MPOs, that conversation has not really even started at MARPA. There's been more of a conversation about the distribution of the planning funds, but to my understanding, there has not been much of a conversation about changing this formula. I think that is probably something that will happen, but to Steve's point, I don't think there's a clear timeline on what that would be.
And I also don't think we have enough work to do in our own region that we should be worrying about that money is going to get figured out to provide this influx of funds or so Brian, so I think that's a much bigger discussion that happens at a different table that obviously a lot of us will be involved in. But what we can do is we can get an update on where that is, Brian, and get back to you, because I don't know. All right.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
I have an answer.
Which is?
So it's not informing the 25 to 29 development tip financials, because in part it's informed by what we receive for apportionment information from our federal partners with regards to the urbanized areas. That's what's informed the MARPA formula in the past. We only submitted our final boundary recommendations based on the 2020 decennial census at the end of the 2023 calendar year. So we don't expect to receive forthcoming guidance from our federal partners until much later in calendar year 2024 at the earliest. So our anticipation is that those decennial census numbers would inform the 2026 to 2020 to the 2030 development tip moving forward.
Okay, and so Steve, if that happened, would the 27, 28, 29 numbers that we're seeing here in terms of the targets change?
I don't know, because we haven't started the process, Brian. And, so the update that Derek Schuster gave is helpful, but it's a bigger discussion. And this is a formula that's been around the 70s. I can't imagine it's going to be a quick fix, kind of easy discussion, because, just as much as we want more funds, every other MPO wants more funds too. You guys go through the whole setting of jobs and population every time we do the long range plan, and that is not a quick process. So I don't want to hazard a guess, Brian, other than obviously from what Eric said and Derek Schuster said, we're kind of at the beginning of that. So I don't even want to hazard any kind of guess, because I don't know. But I can't imagine it's going to be a clean, quick process. I would say that.
Thank you.
All right. Anyone else? Because it's 12:40, and I know before Ethan passes out, because he has a 1 o'clock meeting with all you again. Anyways, are there any more questions before I move on to the next agenda item? All right. So Ethan, get some sustenance before you start again at 1 o'clock. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 15, which is member items. Any members of the board have any items for the rest? Jen?
Realize I should have done this in public comment when everyone else did, but because right now I'm between everyone and lunch. But I just wanted to share a quick update to follow up with Yasha Franklin Hodges, December 7th update on Rutherford Avenue. MassDOT has provided some comments on the design. We've responded, plan to address those at our next design submission. Vineet Gupta also presented on the Rutherford plans to the Inner Core Committee, MAPC and CTPS for providing us that forum. We also have a meeting scheduled with our counterparts in Somerville, Everett, and Cambridge in a couple weeks. We're of course pleased Rutherford was not in the list of projects recommended for delay, and we intend to work post haste to keep it that way. Thank you all.
All right, anyone else? I have one quick one. If folks are planning to go to the Innovation Conference on April 30th and May 1st in Worcester, you might have all noticed that we have an early bird registration, and after that, the cost goes up. So if you're planning on going, you haven't registered, you should now, because I believe that goes away on February 21st. All right. Brian, you got something?
Move to adjourn.
All right. Is there a second?
Again, seconds.
All right. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye. Do we have to do a roll?
Nope.
Dave, I don't remember.
Without objection, we are adjourned.
All right. Thanks, everybody.